Chapter 24:10. After Ling Han taught for a while, it was Wally's turn. In terms of the power of heaven and earth, Wally was definitely stronger. Wally was also very interested in Little Terror. After all, natural products were rare, so he didn't mind teaching and studying them at the same time. Ling Han sat at the side, and in a short while, he heard the sound of a table being slammed. He slowly strolled to the conference hall. Sure enough, the Tai clan's envoy's face was full of anger as he slammed the table repeatedly. Fine, I gave you face, but you don't want it, so just wait to be destroyed. There were a total of 2 people from the Tai clan. The one who was speaking now was a middle-aged man in his 30s, with first severance cultivation level, and the other was a young man in his 20s, currently sipping tea, looking very calm and relaxed. When the middle-aged man finished speaking, the young man put down his teacup and coughed lightly. Young master, and please speak. The middle-aged man hurriedly bowed, like a servant, expressing goodwill towards the young man. Only then did the young man say, "You have to think clearly. Are you really going to refuse our Tai clan's good intentions?" Hey, young master, and said, "Have you all thought clearly? Don't be muddle-headed." The middle-aged man immediately used his connections to intimidate others, pointing at them one by one, looking very much like a villain. "This is our final decision," Feng Puyin said calmly. He had been a top elite in the small world, so he naturally had his own integrity and style, which was something that many people who were far stronger than him did not have. Thus, there was a saying, "It was better to be the head of a chicken than the tail of an ox." "You are all a bunch of pigs," the middle-aged man rebuked loudly, wanting nothing more than to run over and strangle them. Meanwhile, the young man only smiled. "I'd like to. Where do you all get such confidence from?" He reached out to grab Feng Puyin. This was the strongest elite present, 4th severance cultivation level. As long as he could capture Feng Puyin, it would naturally destroy the confidence of everyone here. Feng Puyin humphed softly and moved to parry the attack. His natural talent was far from being able to compare with that of Ling Han and the Rain Emperor, but he had been able to advance to the Shattering Void tier in the impoverished lower realm all those years ago, so he could actually be considered an extraordinary genius. It was just that the celestial realm was too big, and there were too many geniuses, so he was not very eye-catching. However, his battle prowess wasn't weak either. Over the past few days, Ling Han had furiously raised his strength. Whatever ancestral monarch blood, high-tier medicinal pills, anything that could be used had been used. Coupled with the acceleration of time, his battle prowess had risen to an astonishing level. Boom, 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 the 2 of them exchanged blows, instantly destroying the hall and sending it flying into the sky. Hee, if young masterin makes a move, that person will definitely die, the middle-aged man said sarcastically. Young master, and was one of the most outstanding members of the Tai clan's younger generation. His name was Taiyan, and he was only 1 step away from the dividing soul tier. But no one panicked. Even if Feng Puyin wasn't a match for him, wasn't there still Ling Han? In the sky, the more Taiyan fought, the more panicked he became. He still hadn't taken down his opponent? This greatly exceeded his expectations. In his expectations, he would be able to gain the absolute upper hand in 100 moves at most, and establish an absolute advantage in 500 moves. However, they had already exchanged 200 or 300 moves, yet not only had he not gained the upper hand, but he was even being suppressed instead. He couldn't accept this. He was an outstanding member of the Tai clan's younger generation, yet he actually couldn't suppress an unorthodox person. Meanwhile, the more Feng Puyin fought, the more satisfied he became. He originally didn't have such powerful battle prowess, and it was all thanks to the benefits of Ling Han's sudden increase that his battle prowess had doubled. In the beginning, he still couldn't get used to such powerful strength, but after fighting for a long time, he finally got used to it, and completely suppressed Taiyan. Pung. Flashes of light continuously flashed in the sky, and deafening rumbles rang out incessantly. After more than half a day, a figure suddenly fell from the sky. The middle-aged man instantly laughed loudly. Ha, young masterin won. Young masterin. After laughing for a while, he realized that the person who had fallen was actually Taiyan. He hurriedly ran over and helped Taiyan up. Feng Piyin landed on the ground, his confidence soaring. He felt as if he had returned to a small world. Although the world was vast, he could do as he pleased. Scram! Feng Piyin rebuked. You dare to tell us to scram? The middle-aged man was incredulous. One had to know that the Tai clan had a dividing soul tier elite. So what if you beat Taiyan? The Tai clan had people who could suppress you. Taiyan, however, felt that he had lost face, and stopped the middle-aged man's rebuke. He said darkly, so there are still hidden dragons and crouching tigers in Coiling Cloud Mountain. All right, I admit defeat this time. He pushed the middle-aged man away, wanting to walk on his own. Young master and young master and the middle-aged man hurriedly followed. However, he had just taken a step when he saw someone blocking in front of him. He couldn't help but become angry and rebuked, Scram. Ling Han smiled slightly. Your mouth is too smelly. If I don't teach you a lesson, you won't remember. He waved his hand and paw. He slapped the middle-aged man across the face. The middle-aged man's body spun quite a few times, and a spray of blood, and a dozen or so fragments also sprayed out. Ah! The middle-aged man screamed. After stabilizing himself with great difficulty, he turned to Ling Han and said, You dare to hit me? Ling Han was shocked. You still haven't learned your lesson? The middle-aged man hurriedly chased after Taiyan. He was already filled with fear towards Ling Han. He had slapped him into a retard with a single palm. He was completely no match for him. Meanwhile, Taiyan glanced at Ling Han and Feng Piyin a few more times, and then left without even turning his head. He would definitely come back. Ling Han didn't stop him. In any case, he was going to stay here for a while, and the Tai clan would just treat it as a diversion. This time, the Tai clan's reaction was much faster, and also much fiercer. A measly severing mundane tier force not only rejected their good intentions, but actually wounded their envoy. A day later, the Tai clan mobilized a large number of troops. There were 2 dividing soul tier elites leading the team, and they were accompanied by 11 severing mundane tier elites. Added with a few Genesis tier elites, this could be said to be a vast group. Young Master Yin, I've made a fool of myself. There was an outsider among this group of Tai clan, but if Ling Han was here, he would definitely be able to recognize him with a single glance. This was Fu Gaoyan, the ruler of Separation Hatred City, a direct descendant of the Fu clan, and one of the heirs of the clan in the past. In the past, he had been one of the heirs, and now, he was the only one. Thus, the Tai clan naturally had to be incredibly respectful towards Fu Gaoyan. Meanwhile, Fu Gaoyan was cold and indifferent. He had just accepted the Tai clan's invitation to be a guest, and in the end, he encountered this matter. His blood was boiling, and he thought that since he had nothing to do, he might as well come over. He indeed had nothing to do. As the mighty heir of the Fu clan, he was actually so frivolous and carefree. After so many years, his cultivation level had also greatly improved. It was already very good that he had reached the Earth Soul tier. The group of people ferociously charged into the town. They were far too powerful, and their arrogance soared into the sky. The merchants in the town all found a place to hide, afraid that they would be caught in the crossfire. Where's the person in charge of this place? Come out! A dividing soul tier elite of the Tai clan shouted. Feng Piyin, Mu Rongqing, and Ling Han walked out together. Fu Gaoyan's eyes instantly widened, and he rubbed his eyes as if he had seen a ghost. Chapter 24:12. Ling Han began special training for everyone. With Wall's help, he had a special way of studying the power of heaven and earth, and could bypass the necessary cultivation level barriers. For example, a severing mundane tier had to go to a mystery realm related to the severing mundane tier, and a dividing soul had to go to another mystery realm. 30,000 years wasn't enough for him at all. The opening of a mystery realm wasn't decided by anyone. With Wall's help, he could bypass all of this. In any case, he already owed this guy a lot, and Ling Han indeed had a lot of Celestial King materials in his hands, such as the Green Song Celestial Sword, Celestial King Ring, and a small piece of celestial metal. It was enough to pay. Thus, Wall also worked hard to calculate and predict, looking for a way to bypass the mystery realm of heaven and earth. Perhaps even a heavenly venerable couldn't do it, But Wall could, because he was the product of several hundred epochs worth of resources from a plane, and was the absolute essence. As expected, not long after, Wall came up with a plan. This required using the power of heaven and earth to forcefully push it up. The power of heaven and earth was above the regulations. Ling Han came up with a plan. This could either be done by a heavenly venerable and guide in some mystical power of heaven and earth, or he could use the dimension scroll to absorb some of the power and guide it into the body of the target. The first method was safe, but where could he find a heavenly venerable? Wu Luo and Zhou Heng thought highly of him, but it didn't mean that Ling Han could ask them for help for everything. And this wasn't just once or twice, but many times. Thus, Ling Han decided to do it himself. He cultivated hard, throwing all kinds of resources on himself, and squandering the blood essence of the ancestral king like it was free. After 3,000 years, he finally tempered his source power. The origin power in his body had basically turned into source power, but it wasn't pure. Ascending origin tier, great perfection tier. Next, he had to continuously temper his source power and extract the source power of heaven and earth for his own use, accumulating the amount of source power. Once the door to the great perfection tier was opened, the upper limit of his body technique also increased further, and his vitality soared to 4,800. At this rate, he really could have Celestial King battle prowess when he reached the consummate level. If word of this got out, there would definitely be no one who would believe that an ascending origin tier could actually rival a Celestial King, even if it was the weakest Celestial King. The cultivation of the others was also skyrocketing. With Ling Han, the Alchemy Emperor's continuous supply of pills, in addition to Wally's guidance that transcended the knowledge of this plane, if their progress was still not fast, they would really have to apologize. Ling Han was very gratified. Even his parents, who had mediocre talent in martial art, were rapidly improving their cultivation level, but it would be difficult for them to reach the consummate level of the ascending origin tier within 40,000 years. After 40,000 years, he had to leave. He could only refine the celestial immortal and give it to his parents for them to consume. With Grandmaster Zicheng and the others looking after him, there shouldn't be any problems. And he had finally concocted his first Celestial King level pill, causing a sensation in the entire Eastern Celestial realm. After hundreds of millions of years, the Eastern Celestial domain finally had a 5-star Grandmaster. Alchemy City naturally went crazy. The entire city was in a state of jubilation. Because of this, they naturally had to hold a great banquet and invite important figures from all over. Every Celestial King received an invitation, and the majority of Celestial Kings also gave face, deciding to attend. They had also received information about Ling Han. He was a Super Emperor star, and not only would he definitely become a 9th Heaven Celestial King, he might even become a Heavenly Venerable. Just for the sake of Ling Han's potential, the various great Celestial Kings also had to make emotional investments. Thus, a great many Celestial Kings came to the great banquet. Unlike the last time when Ling Han had assumed the position of chairperson, when the Celestial King tier forces had only sent out representatives. With a single comparison, it could be seen how great the change in Ling Han's present status was. In Alchemy City, everyone was in a jubilant mood. With such a chairperson, they were naturally incredibly proud. Even Xie Yongbing was completely convinced. Ling Han was actually a 5-star Grandmaster. This was an existence that even he had to look up to. Perhaps in another epoch, he might become a 5-star Grandmaster. But that was only a possibility, and that was something that was too far in the future. There were also some big shots among the Celestial Kings, such as the Eternal Prosperity Celestial King. He was an 8th Heaven being, and in the Eastern Celestial Realm, he was also one of the top elites. He had personally come with Yin Xianlu, giving enough face to Ling Han. Brother Ling. Yin Xianlu was also in a jubilant mood. Congratulations, congratulations. Ling Han nodded with a smile. Recently, he had heard such words so much that his ears were about to get sick of it. What cultivation level are you at now? Can you make it in time for the 30,000-year deadline? Yin Xianlu asked. Only then did Ling Han perk up a little and said, there should be no problem. What he was worried about was not the advancement of his cultivation level, but the materials to refine a celestial king. Now he was opening up a wide path to wealth, because refining a celestial king required a frightening amount of resources. Even if he had plundered the possessions of a great many ancient kings of the foreign realm, it was still not enough. There was no helping it. There were many things in the foreign realm that could not be used here. The regulations were different, and the power of heaven and earth was different. The difference was too great. Yan Xianlu looked around, and then said in a low voice, "I have received news that some people want to attack you on the celestial path." Ling Han smiled. "Oh, is that so?" Celestial kings could not step onto the celestial path, so when he reached the consummate level of the ascending origin tier, merely his battle prowess in terms of regulations would be able to sweep aside all ascending origin tiers. What more when it was very likely that his body techniques would reach celestial king tier level. If celestial kings did not appear, who would be a match for him? "Brother Ling, you must not be careless. There are really some super monsters among these people, and they already possessed the strength to sweep aside all ascending origin tiers billions of years ago. It's just that the celestial path has yet to open, and they are unable to advance into the celestial king tier," Yan Xianlu said solemnly. "After so many years of tempering, their strength is unfathomable, and a few even possess some celestial king tier techniques." Ling Han's interest was instantly piqued. Really? Yan Xianlu really did not know whether to laugh or cry. The opponents were almost nature-defying, and you actually looked so interested. It should be known that they were targeting you. According to my master, those people can enter a kind of state known as the heaven restriction. Under the heaven restriction, it is equivalent to them becoming celestial kings. No ascending origin tier is a match for them, he hurriedly said. Ling Han was becoming more and more interested. Heaven restriction? What kind of state is that? I don't know, but only monarch tier cultivators that have reached the peak stage of the consummate level of the ascending origin tier and accumulated their cultivation for innumerable years could possibly comprehend the heaven restriction, Yan Xianlu said. Different levels of talent in martial art also differ when one can enter the heaven restriction. Ling Han gave an a sliver of a smile on his face, but his fighting spirit was already blazing. He wanted to battle this kind of opponent. In the new generation, though Shi Changzi and Jiaolan were noble emperor stars, because of the accumulation of time, they could not possibly enter the heaven restriction state. But Ji Wuming could definitely, because he was the reincarnation of the strongest ninth heaven celestial king. He definitely grasped this kind of state. He could battle Ji Wuming again. Ling Han's blood was boiling. All this way, only Ji Wuming had given him immense pressure, causing him to treasure this opponent very much. Yan Xianlu could only be speechless. His original intention was to give Ling Han a reminder, but he forgot that this guy was a battle-hungry person. Yi Qing Zixin Fuzhou and the other monarch tiers also arrived one after another. Coincidentally, they had originally been at the St. Source Academy, and just happened to have returned due to some matters. Otherwise, they would definitely have missed this grand occasion. Ling Han drank and chatted with them, and only bid farewell after spending a whole month together. He began to cultivate wholeheartedly. Chapter 24:13. Time flew by quickly, and everyone's cultivation was rapidly increasing. 10,000 years passed, and Ling Dongxing and his wife finally advanced into the severing mundane tier. Moreover, they used Wall's special method, and did not have to sever their mortal bonds. Such a severing mundane tier was even weaker than an ordinary severing mundane tier, but Ling Han did not care. He only wanted cultivation level. As long as he could advance to the ascending origin tier in future, he would be able to forcibly raise his cultivation level to celestial king tier as a celestial. Even Ling Dongxing and his wife could advance into the severing mundane tier, so there was no need to mention the others, who advanced even faster. Meanwhile, Ling Han had not completed the second tempering of his source power. After another 5,000 years, he finally completed this second step, advancing into the consummate level of the ascending origin tier. Once the upper limit of his cultivation level was opened, his battle prowess soared again, and his vitality index reached 4,999 points. The lowest standard for Celestial King tier was 5,000 points. It was just a little short. Ling Han was surprised. He was weaker than a Celestial King, and there seemed to be some kind of mysterious restriction in the heaven and earth. If you were not a Celestial King, you could not possibly have Celestial King tier battle prowess. However, it was just a little short, and it could really be said that there was no difference. Similarly, his defense index was only one short of 5,000. In other words, a first heaven Celestial King could hurt, wound, or even kill him, but they would have to attack him countless times. This kind of defense would probably give even a first heaven Celestial King a headache. At this step, the source power in Ling Han's body was already incredibly pure. What he needed to do was strengthen the source power, fill his whole dantian, and reach the peak stage of consummate level. This step would take a very, very long time. Source power was the essence of origin power, and about 100,000 portions of origin power could condense into one portion of source power. It was clear how difficult this was, and the time needed was naturally astonishingly long. However, Ling Han had enough confidence that he could definitely reach the peak stage of consummate level before the celestial path opened. Taking a step back, even if he was a little short, it was fine. The celestial path would open for a very, very long time, and he could cultivate to the peak stage of consummate level in the celestial path. Hunyou, the Empress, and bewitching Maiden Ro were all confident that they would be able to reach the peak stage of consummate level before the celestial path opened. But the others could forget about it. The gap was not just a little. Ling Han once again focused his attention on alchemy. He definitely had to push the success rate of concocting 5-star alchemical pills to the level of 100%. Otherwise, when the time came, even if he only failed once in concocting a celestial pill, he would feel incredibly pained. Relying on the astonishing money-making machine that was Alchemy City, Ling Han's net worth became thicker and thicker, and the number of celestial portions that he could concoct also increased. Of course, he still lacked celestial seeds, which could only be obtained on the celestial path. 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years. Time flew by. Ling Han's only regret was that he had yet to find his son. He didn't know how his unfilial son was doing now. After getting a wife, he actually abandoned his parents and didn't come back for so long. The deadline of 30,000 years was about to arrive, and Ling Han and the others set off once again, preparing to walk the path of immortality and become immortal kings. Every one of them was a little excited. Celestial kings, the highest level of the celestial realm aside, were pitifully few in number, and could be counted with a single hand. Ling Han, Hunyou, the Empress, and bewitching Maiden Ro naturally all reached the peak stage of the consummate level of the ascending origin tier. Little Terror was not far behind. After getting used to his new cultivation technique, he had already recovered to the consummate level of the origin tier, and his battle prowess was terrifying. The four of them, together with Hua, headed all the way north. At the northernmost part of this continent was the entrance to the celestial path. Though the celestial path was called a path, it was actually a massive mystery realm. Both the eastern celestial realm and the western celestial realm had a path to enter, and it would only appear once every 10 billion years. Ling Han and the others traveled over land and water, and after 3 years, they arrived at the entrance to the celestial path. At this time, there were still about 2 years' time until the celestial path opened. The time was not fixed. Sometimes it would open a little earlier, and sometimes it would open a little later. Thus, everyone would try their best to arrive as early as possible. Because Yen Xianlu and the others were all cultivating in the Saint Source Academy, they would enter from the entrance of the Western Celestial Realm, and would not encounter Ling Han and the others here. Damn brat, Grandpa Dog has come to send you on your last journey. The large black dog popped out from who knew where. Ling Han couldn't help but feel gloomy. He had not died, so what was there to say that he would send him on his last journey? This damn dog just had a cheap mouth. Ling Han humphed and asked, "Have you cultivated the power of a heavenly venerable tier yet?" "Damn brat, Grandpa Dog is just about to settle the score with you." The large black dog's expression was filled with displeasure. What kind of lousy cultivation technique is that, and what model formula? Hey, Grandpa Dog has not understood it even after so many years. Ling Han laughed loudly. You are stupid, so don't blame others for giving you difficult questions. The large black dog ignored him and pulled Hua to one side. The man and dog spoke quietly, and Ling Han could not be bothered to listen. It had to be related to cultivating the power of heaven and earth. A great many people recognized Ling Han and knew that he was the chairperson of Alchemy City, and more so a 5-star alchemist. They all came to pay their respects, even if those who came here were basically in the ascending origin tier. And of course, there were also some who had come to join in the fun. Their strength was uneven, and there were very few of them. But even if someone had walked the celestial path and successfully been crowned as a king, they still had to be polite when they saw Ling Han. The martial art environment of the Eastern Celestial Realm could not compare to that of the Western Celestial Realm in the first place, and added with the fact that the majority of monarchs and emperor tiers had gone to the Saint Source Academy. There were pitifully few prodigies here now. Even if they had stepped onto the celestial path, there were pitifully few who could ultimately cultivate a celestial seed and become a celestial king. In the blink of an eye, 3 years had passed. Everyone was used to waiting. One day, a rainbow suddenly appeared in the sky. Instantly, everyone's eyes were drawn over. Upon closer inspection, they discovered that this was not an ordinary rainbow. Not only was it 9 colors, but one end was connected to the ground, while the other end was connected to the endless galaxy. The celestial path has appeared, someone said. Instantly, the crowd was seething with excitement. Some people had come here more than once, while others were here for the first time. That kind of excitement was naturally not something that experienced people could compare to. They were filled with confidence, thinking that the failure of others was their problem, and that they would definitely succeed. Ling Han turned around and asked, Wall, are you going? No. The large black dog shook his paw repeatedly. Now that he is Grandpa Dog's man, don't have any ideas about him. Meanwhile, Wall did not make a sound at the side, tacitly agreeing. Ling Han couldn't help but smile. He did not know what price the large black dog had paid to make Wall agree to cooperate with him. And it was most likely divine metal. It seemed like Wall only accepted this kind of thing, and the large black dog was a 9th heaven celestial king, so he would definitely be able to obtain divine metal. Alright then, let's go. Ling Han and the others set off, walking towards the rainbow. They were not the first. A great many people had already stepped onto the rainbow, but they had only taken a few steps before falling down. This caused the others to all fly up, wanting to directly descend from the sky. However, the strange thing was that they could not descend onto the rainbow from the sky. Ling Han and the others also stepped onto the rainbow. The first thing they felt was that it was slippery, causing their bodies to become unsteady, and they almost immediately fell down. No wonder so many people could not stand firmly. Indeed, the cultivation level of the ascending origin tier seemed to be useless in this place. That was because this was a mystery realm of heaven and earth, and even celestial kings could not match its might. Chapter 24:14. Why was it so difficult for ascending origin tiers to become celestial kings? Not to mention finding or cultivating a complete celestial seed. Just wanting to enter the true celestial path, through this path, was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. All the ascending origin tiers were like people learning to walk, tripping after every few steps, looking very pathetic. Ling Han had walked the furthest, and now, the person who walked the furthest only managed to walk a distance of 300 meters. Most people were flopping around in the area of 30 meters, which was a comical sight. He walked it himself, and had personal experience. Why was it difficult to walk? Because this rainbow bridge was formed from regulations, and it was constantly changing 9 regulations. Those who did not cultivate the corresponding regulations would be severely targeted, and would easily slide down. If they wanted to cross the bridge, they could. Firstly, if you were proficient in these 9 regulations, then no matter how the regulations changed, you could deal with them calmly. But below Celestial King tier, who would have so much free time to cultivate other regulations. Even if they did, they would only be proficient in 2 or 3, 4 or 5. Sorry, they did not have that much energy. Thus, if one wanted to be proficient in 9 regulations, this was really something that only the strong could do. Secondly, if one's grasp of one regulation reached the pinnacle, then no matter how the outside world changed, one would be able to deal with the myriad changes by remaining unchanged. This was naturally also a method. Though one had to be careful and conscientious, it was suitable for the majority of cultivators. For example, the Empress, Hunyo, and Bewitching Maiden Ro were all proficient in one regulation, but because of the grand cosmic infinite body, they also had considerable attainments in the regulations of time. They could still advance steadily. Their speed was not fast, but each step was steady. Ling Han had cultivated each cultivation level, and each kind of regulation to a perfect level. Thus he could safely pass through with just a single regulation. What more when the number of regulations he had grasped had reached a certain number? But Ling Han walked in the opposite direction, not using any regulations, and just strode forward like this. His body technique was tempered by the power of heaven and earth, and this level was even above regulations. Ling Han wanted to try and see if he could do it here. At first, he could not step onto the Rainbow Bridge at all, and was inferior to even the weakest ascending origin tier. This caused many people to snicker secretly, but because they were wary of his identity as the chairperson of Alchemy City, no one dared to laugh out loud, but whispers were unavoidable. What is an alchemist doing here? Have you ever seen an alchemist become an immortal king? How is it possible for someone with different talents to be crowned king in 2 different domains? That's right. A 5-star alchemist is already awesome enough, yet he still wants to become a celestial king. These people were all narrow-minded. They were making sarcastic remarks on the side, but they were only whispering to each other, not daring to let Ling Han hear them. Actually, Ling Han could hear them, but he was too lazy to care. Did he still need to care about the gazes of these scum? It was just like how a tiger could ignore an ant's provocation. Ling Han told the queen and the others not to wait for him. Anyway, if he fell too far behind, he would use the power of rules to catch up. He believed that it wouldn't take long to reach the top of the rainbow. He was very interested in the immortal path itself. Before this, he had specially asked the Eternal Prosperity Celestial King for guidance, and also asked Wally to analyze and predict. He believed that the celestial path was very likely to be the core of the celestial realm, or at least a place close to the core. Thus, it was possible to capture the essence of rules here, and even turn it into a celestial seed that could be planted in a cultivator's consciousness, connecting with the rules. I am the rules, and I am the representative of the heaven and earth. What Ling Han was concerned about was whether he could sense the power of heaven and earth now that he was close to the core. He had heard Wally say before that the origin world was formed from 6 kinds of essence energy, and it was the same for every plane. However, the higher the level of the plane, the more of this essence energy it possessed, and the more flexible it would be to accommodate elites. For example, the celestial realm and the foreign realm were actually both low-level planes, but the celestial realm couldn't accommodate heavenly venerables below, but the foreign realm could. Aside from these 6 kinds of essence energy, every plane had its own unique power, which could also be called a seal. This was something that had to be grasped in order to become a heavenly venerable. Thus, there was another reason why Ling Han had to enter the celestial path, and that was to sense that unique power of the celestial realm. A mere ascending origin tier. Even if he became a celestial king, that would only be the first heaven, and he actually wanted to sense the power of heaven and earth, and ascend to the heavens in a single step. If this happened to anyone else, it would naturally be a joke, but Ling Han could now extract the energy of virtual child. Though he couldn't refine it at all, and could only borrow this kind of power to flow through his body for a while to temper himself, he had, after all, sensed this level of power before. It was precisely because of this consideration that he would use the power of heaven and earth to try walking the Rainbow Bridge. He continued to fail, but had no intention of giving up. He faintly had a feeling that it was feasible. He didn't know where his confidence came from, but he just had to believe it. 100, 1,000, 10,000 times. Though the Empress and the others walked slowly, after such a long time, they had already walked so far that they couldn't be seen with the naked eye, and a large number of people had adapted to the changes on the Rainbow Bridge. Those that could succeed had more or less succeeded, and step by step, they slowly walked towards the other end of the Rainbow Bridge. Ling Han naturally became the laughingstock of many people. The main reason for this was because of jealousy. The chairperson of Alchemy City, the youngest 5-star alchemist in history, was also so freakish in cultivation. If he was still so freakish in cultivation, how could others live? People would always think of ways to give themselves a sense of superiority. 30,000 times, 50,000 times, 100,000 times. Ling Han suddenly broke into a smile. He had finally found the way, and faintly sensed an energy that was on a similar level to Virtual Child's energy, yet was also completely different. It was a unique power that belonged to the celestial realm. If Ninth Heaven celestial kings knew about this, they would all go mad with envy. For Feng Qing, the 9 and 5 paragons, becoming a second step heavenly venerable was transcendence. But for the vast majority of Ninth Heaven celestial kings, actually becoming a heavenly venerable was their transcendence. Otherwise, they could only be on par with the regulations. Sensing that unique power of the celestial realm was the first step to becoming a heavenly venerable. Unfortunately, there were far, far too many Ninth Heaven celestial kings that even this step was within their reach. In terms of which celestial king in the celestial realm could achieve this, it was probably the Royal Void. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the ambition to become a heavenly venerable within an epoch. This was the unique power of the celestial realm. Ling Han nodded internally and tried to use the model that Wall had given him to absorb this kind of power. But regrettably, he was completely unable to draw upon it. It was very simple. Wall's model, or rather cultivation technique, was targeted at Virtual Child energy. And this power only belonged to the celestial realm, and was unique, so it was completely wrong. No matter. Since he had already sensed this power, it was equivalent to taking the most important step from Celestial King to Heavenly Venerable. And Ling Han hadn't even become a Celestial King yet. As for becoming a Heavenly Venerable, Ling Han was naturally even more confident. He began to take large strides forward, step by step as if he were walking on flat ground. And in the end, he even began to sprint. Because his body had been tempered by Virtual Child energy, its level was above the regulations, and even surpassed that unique power of the celestial realm. Once he got used to it, he began to erupt. Ling Han sprinted madly. Cell phone reading was even more refreshing. Chapter 24:16. This was a very real threat. Celestial kings of the celestial realm couldn't enter the celestial path, but they could if they really wanted to, severing their cultivation and starting anew. However, there were celestial kings in the celestial path, so the celestial kings here were equivalent to heavenly venerables, invincible. Ling Han laughed. He dared to point at heavenly venerables and scold them. So how could he be frightened by an ascending origin stage? He walked forward. What I hate the most is others threatening me. This is not a threat, the tall man said calmly, his gaze sinister, and his killing intent indeed very strong. He didn't know Ling Han and the others, but these people were too hateful, actually crossing the Rainbow Bridge so quickly, causing him to lose once. When he was displeased, he would want to kill, and those outside the celestial path. Sorry, he only saw them as prey. Hunyo jumped out first. If you want to fight Nyo's Ling Han, you have to first pass Nyo. She was mainly itching to fight. There was no opponent in the Eastern Celestial Realm at all, and elites were lonely. The tall man couldn't help but be stunned. Hunyo and the Empress were both indescribably beautiful. He could still resist before. But now that Hunyo stood out like this, he couldn't help but have his gaze stolen, his heartbeat speeding up. You still want to kill Nyo's Ling Han, you stinky bug. Hunyo attacked first. Hong. Her attack was extremely terrifying, and when her small fist shot out, it was as if heaven and earth were collapsing. The expressions of the tall and short men changed drastically. Though the short man didn't have killing intent, he didn't take Ling Han and the others seriously either. Only when Hunyo attacked did they realize how terrifying their opponents were. No wonder they could cross the Rainbow Bridge in 3 days. Without outstanding talent and strength, how could it be possible? And this was because they didn't see the scene of Ling Han sprinting wildly on the Rainbow Bridge, or they would definitely be scared to death. The tall man hurriedly parried, but he was completely inadequate in front of Hunyo, and was soon completely suppressed. Defeat was only a matter of an instant. This was natural. Hunyo was the Emperor's star. Ah! The tall man roared in fury. He took out something that was a bit red like mud, and actually stuffed it into his mouth. Even if you can't win, you don't have to eat dirt, right? Hunyo laughed loudly. The tall man did not reply, but his battle prowess actually soared by many times in an instant. Veins popped up all over his body, making him look like some kind of monster. It was extremely terrifying. Ling Han's eyes involuntarily narrowed. Even if this tall man had gone berserk now, he was still not Hunyo's match, but at least he had the ability to fight back. However, it should be known that Hunyo was the Emperor's star, and this person was only a king tier at most. What the hell was that red thing? It could actually allow a king tier to instantly experience a leap of 2 whole tiers? From a king to an Emperor's star, the increase in combat power was shocking. Humph, Nyo will still beat you to a pulp, Hunyo shouted loudly, her small fists explosively flying out. Sure enough, it was only 100 moves, and the tall man was suppressed. Even if they were all Emperor stars, there was still a difference in strength. Now Hunyo belonged to a very strong Emperor star. The tall man was trampled under Hunyo's foot. He tried his best to get up, but he felt as if there was an immovable mountain pressing down on him, and he couldn't move at all. Let's talk things out. The short man hurriedly tried to smooth things over. He was also given a fright. He had never thought that the strength of Ling Han's group would be so terrifying. Even his companion couldn't win even after using his ultimate technique. Ling Han smiled and said, "That red thing, you also have it, right?" The short man hesitated slightly, and sure enough, he took out a red thing from his clothes. It really looked like mud, but it was very slippery and full of elasticity. It was completely impossible to tell what it was. Ling Han took it and studied it carefully, but couldn't sense anything. He thought for a moment, and then suddenly bit it. The short man couldn't help but be dumbfounded, thinking, "Is this person an idiot? He doesn't even know what this thing is, and still dares to bite it. What if it's something extremely poisonous?" Ling Han dared to eat it, so he naturally had a very high degree of confidence. Firstly, the tall man ate it. Secondly, his physique was incredibly astonishing, and he was only a hair's breadth away from Celestial King tier, and could completely be regarded as a Celestial King tier. Thus, he naturally had no fear. He was too curious. Something that could cause a King tier strength to soar so crazily was not normal. And Ling Han's eyes lit up. His body was actually absorbing that unique energy in this heaven and earth. Fuck, this thing was too astonishing, wasn't it? No, wait. Ling Han immediately shook his head. Though his body had absorbed this kind of energy, he couldn't really absorb it, and could only use it as a channel. Furthermore, in this process, his physique didn't receive the slightest bit of improvement. If anyone wanted to rely on this to comprehend the first step to the heavenly venerable tier, this was completely impossible. Even so, this was enough of a shock. A red thing that could allow one to borrow the power of heaven and earth. No wonder the tall man's strength had soared so much all of a sudden, just like Ling Han. He was clearly only at the consummate level of the ascending origin tier, but his battle prowess had soared to the level of a first heaven celestial king tier. It was just that it wasn't that exaggerated. Furthermore, this thing was useless after taking it out of the celestial path. Thus, it was only in this place that the power of heaven and earth was so close. Outside of this place, it was out of reach. What made Ling Han even more gloomy was that he couldn't obtain the slightest increase in battle prowess. As for the reason, it was probably because he had already used the higher grade void energy to temper his body, so the red devil earth couldn't have the effect of increasing battle prowess. Hunyo was in high spirits. The more she was forbidden by Ling Han, the more she couldn't forget it. In view of the tall man's killing intent this time, Ling Han didn't plan to stop him. Instead, he told Hunyo to have fun. Once she was satisfied, She wouldn't mention it again in the future. The little girl drew out an iron spear, and a mischievous expression appeared on her face. Then she suddenly stabbed it at the tall man's buttocks. Ah! The tall man screamed, as miserable as he could be. Ling Han ignored him, and merely patted the short man's shoulder. Oh, that's right. I forgot to ask you guys where you came from. The short man wanted to cry. You guys are too cruel. You guys don't even know who we are. And yet you've brutally abused your companions. In fact, you guys even burst his ass. Just looking at it hurt. We are the subordinates of Songbei Wang. Ling Han smiled. Come, introduce this Songbei Wang to me. In the celestial path, the various celestial kings naturally called themselves kings. Many people, for one reason or another, didn't leave the celestial path in time. As a result, they were trapped here forever. And among them, there were a few with outstanding talent. Most of them were emperor tiers. And after experiencing a long period of time, they naturally had the possibility of becoming celestial kings. In addition, the trapped people would also have children here, and the inheritance would be passed down from generation to generation. There would also be some outstanding geniuses who would become celestial kings. Songbei Wang was the latter. He was born and raised on the celestial path. His parents were disciples from large sects, but they never became celestial kings. On the other hand, he had the aptitude of emperor tiers, and after countless years of bitter cultivation, he reached the peak of his life. Songbei Wang controlled the Rainbow Bridge to enter the key point of the celestial path. If one wanted to enter the vast space of the celestial path, they had to pass through Songbei Wang's territory. Ling Han asked about the power structure of the celestial path again, and finally had a further understanding of this place. In the celestial path, the highest realm of celestial kings was only the third firmament. There was no way around it. It was almost impossible for people who were trapped here to become emperors. It was naturally difficult to become a fourth or fifth firmament celestial king. Chapter 24:17. Songbei Wang was a first heaven celestial king, and had achieved Tao about 7 billion years ago. However, his strength was still quite extraordinary, which was why he could conquer a world and become a king. However, the closer one was to the center of the celestial path, the greater the force, and the stronger the celestial king. Why? It was said that there was an astonishing treasure in the center of the celestial path, and all the great celestial kings wanted to fight for it. Thus they established their own force, fighting each other, and searching everywhere. But until now, no one had obtained this treasure. Ling Han really wanted to know what this treasure was. But unfortunately, the short man was limited by his status, and had no way to know such a great secret. Then what is this? Ling Han raised his hand, and tossed the red substance in his hand. This thing was very astonishing, actually able to draw on the unique power of the celestial realm. Although it could not be used to temper his body, if he could continuously experience it, it would definitely allow Ling Han to become a heavenly venerable faster after advancing to 9th heaven celestial king. We call this red devil soil, the short man said. How did it come about? Ling Han was more curious about the origin of this thing. Could it be ejected from the core of the heaven and earth? I don't know either, the short man said. He told the short man the truth. This thing was not something rare on the celestial path. Just like alchemical pills and weapons, there were people selling them. And the price was not ridiculously high. At least, ascending origin tiers could completely afford them. Consuming it directly was actually the simplest way to use the red devil soil. It could also be used to build buildings, forming an incredibly sturdy defense. This was also how the red devil soil got its name. Additionally, adding some red devil soil when forging a weapon could greatly increase the weapon's power. But the red devil soil was a consumable. Once it was used up, the weapon would become ordinary. What about the celestial seed? Ling Han asked. The celestial seed is an incredibly precious thing, the short man hurriedly said. At the same time, he showed an expression of envy. The celestial seed can only be plucked and nurtured in one's body. Once taken out, it will become useless. I've stayed at the peak stage of the consummate level of the ascending origin tier for 7 billion years, but still have not collected enough celestial seed fragments. I'm still far from celestial king tier. He shook his head in disappointment. Obtaining a complete celestial seed was an illusory matter. One could only collect broken pieces and use one's body as a furnace to fuse them together. Those who were powerful would be able to cultivate a complete celestial seed. Most of the celestial kings in the world had advanced from the ascending origin tier like this. However, there were also people with heaven-defying luck and heaven-defying strength who directly obtained a complete immortal seed. After becoming an immortal king, their strength would also be world-shaking, far surpassing other immortal kings of the same level. This could be said to be the pinnacle level of the ascending origin tier. Ling Han's heart palpitated with excitement. His parents, Lu Yutong, and the others didn't have much talent in the first place, and he didn't have any hopes of them fighting for him. Hence, as long as he could become an immortal king, he wouldn't have to fear the immortal calamity. They could use the celestial seeds condensed from their fragments to refine into celestials to break through. But he, Hunyo, and the Empress were the main force of the battle, so they definitely had to use a complete celestial seed to break through. Otherwise, he would rather withdraw from the immortal path before the deadline of 10,000 years, and try again 10 billion years later. If the foundation is not solid, how can we build tall buildings? Let's go to Songbei City. Ling Han had the short man lead the way, and set off for the territory of Songbei King. Hunyo played for a while, and felt bored. She clapped her hands, and couldn't be bothered to pay attention to the tall man, chasing after Ling Han and the others. This trip to Songbei City wasn't far. In about half a day's time, a large city appeared in front of them. Ling Han was surprised. In his impression, the cities of the celestial realm were all as large as planets, but this city was far from reaching such a level. Instead, it was more or less the same as the cities of the lower realm, and he could see everything with a single glance. I heard that the cities outside of your city are innumerable times larger than this one, the short man asked. Seeing that the tall man wasn't dead, he felt reassured. He didn't have to worry that Ling Han and the others would kill him to silence him. Ling Han nodded and asked, "Why is the city here so small?" "Because there aren't many people," the short man said, and even sighed. Indeed, every time the celestial path opened, there would be a limited number of people trapped here. But after so many years, they should have multiplied and strengthened, right? According to the short man, this was mainly a problem of fertility. The people here, even if their strength was low, still had a ridiculously low chance of conceiving a child. Thus, the city didn't have to be built too big, or else it would be hard to see a single person within 10,000 miles. The short man led Ling Han and the others into the city. The people here also knew that the celestial path that opened once every 10 billion years was about to open, so the city was also very lively. They all took out their local specialties to exchange for things that weren't here. If they sold them in the future, they would make a fortune. Red Devil soil was naturally the most important. Aside from direct sales, there were also various weapons and shields mixed with Red Devil soil, and the prices were also very high. Strangely, the celestial path didn't produce star stones, so star stones became the item that the locals of the celestial path most hoped to obtain from outsiders. These products made from Red Devil soil were actually very ordinary in the eyes of the locals. Even if they weren't ordinary, they were only slightly more expensive. It was just like celestial medicines. Although they were expensive, they always had a price tag. But to Ling Han, these things couldn't be seen or bought in the outside world. He didn't mind paying a high price to buy them. In any case, to him, star stones were actually the least valuable thing. The four of them were all making large purchases, and the short man watched them spend star stones like flowing water. He was filled with envy in his heart. This thing was a rare item on the celestial path, and it was also a consumable item that could only be replenished once every 10 billion years. The last thing Ling Han lacked was money. Only when they were almost done with their purchases did they return satisfied. However, there were still many merchants chasing after them, fighting to shove their goods into their hands. It was really because they had been too extravagant previously that they did not even try to bargain when buying things. This kind of customer was naturally what they loved the most. There was an inn here, and Ling Han and the others had booked a courtyard. They planned to stay here for a while, mainly to understand the matter of celestial seeds. On the celestial path, there were two types of celestial seeds. One type was complete, and one could become a celestial king with just one. However, this thing was extremely rare, and it would definitely grow in extremely vicious environments. Once someone participated in the competition, there would definitely be a bloodbath. Who didn't know that a naturally complete celestial seed was incomparably precious? The battle prowess of a celestial king, who relied on it, would be a level higher than the first type. The second type was incomplete, and it could appear anywhere. What Ling Han wanted to know was whether there were complete celestial seeds nearby. He asked around, and he really did find out that there was indeed a complete celestial seed about 10,000 miles away from North Songbei City. There was a celestial tree there that bloomed once every few trillion years, and then bore fruit once every few trillion years, and the fruit would only ripen after another few trillion years. All in all, it would be exactly an epoch. And the fruit that this celestial tree bore was a complete celestial seed, and there might be as many as 3 to 5 fruits on the tree. Ling Han's heart palpitated with excitement. Chapter 24:18. An immortal tree could bear several fruits, and each fruit was a complete immortal seed. Ling Han needed a lot of immortal seeds, so he was naturally tempted when he heard this news. Even though complete immortal seeds were extremely rare, there were always people who obtained them, and there were also many pieces of information that spread out. For example, the closer one got to the center of the immortal path, the closer the immortal tree would be to the perfect immortal seed fruit, able to create even more powerful immortal kings. If he could obtain a complete celestial seed here, Ling Han did not plan to refine it himself. However, to be on the safe side, he would keep one. If he did not find a better celestial seed near the end of 10,000 years, he would use this celestial seed to break through. It was better than using an incomplete celestial seed. Very soon they set off. The fruit of the immortal tree was about to ripen. Perhaps in 3 years, or perhaps in 10 years. In any case, it would not take long. Half a day later, they arrived at their destination. It was a valley shrouded in clouds and mist. Walking into it immediately made people dizzy. They couldn't tell north from south. They walked out of the valley in a daze. Once, twice, thrice. No matter how many times he tried, the result was always the same. It was like a ghost walking on a wall. Formation. Ling Han and the other 3 were all curious. They tried to decipher it, but the fog seemed to be formed naturally, and without any pattern. There was no way to break it. After a few times, they still walked out of the valley. Ling Han couldn't help but feel regretful. It would be great if Wally was here. With his inhuman analytical abilities, he might be able to decipher the fog in this valley. You don't have to waste your energy, a voice said leisurely with a strong magnetism. A young man walked over. He was dressed in white and looked very handsome. He had a lazy smile on his face. Ling Han walked over. Why do you say that? The fog in this valley will only dissipate at midnight every day for 2 hours. You can only enter at that time. Otherwise, no matter how strong you are or how high your realm is, you can only go around blindly and come out in a daze. The young man in the black robe explained. Thank you for your guidance. Ling Han cupped his fists. There was day and night on the immortal path, but the day lasted for 72 hours, and the night also lasted for 72 hours. A day was shockingly long. The outsider raised his eyebrows. Ling Han smiled. How did you get out? The young man laughed heartily. If it wasn't an outsider, who would dare to come here? What does that mean? Was it because this place was too dangerous that the locals didn't dare to come here? Or had it been marked as a forbidden area by a certain force that didn't allow outsiders to interfere? I'm Ling Han. How should I address you, sir? Ling Han asked. Because of the other party's reminder, he chose to use peaceful means before resorting to force. Shinhao. The young man said. Outsider, this is not a place you should be in. Trust me. Ling Han gave an O and said. This place is extremely dangerous. You could say that. Shinhao thought for a moment and nodded. But the main danger comes from humans. Ling Han understood that the environment here was indeed dangerous, but it should have been occupied by one or even several forces. That was why there was a saying that the danger mainly came from people. I love to fight. The stronger the opponent, the better, he said. Shen Hao's eyes narrowed slightly before he said, Outsider, you're very confident. However, you know too little about this place. You'll be at a disadvantage. Ling Han didn't think much of it. He took out a handful of red devilish soil and said with a smile, Are you talking about this? Shen Hao was surprised. He indeed wanted to say that if an outsider didn't know about the red devilish soil, he would suffer a crushing defeat if he encountered an opponent of the same level, or even a level lower. He didn't expect that this outsider would know about the red devilish soils, used so soon after the immortal path opened. He even had quite a lot of it. I didn't expect you to discover the secret of the red devilish soil. He paused for a moment and continued. Come, there's a celestial king elder in your family, right? Celestial kings must have walked the immortal path. Hence, if there was a celestial king behind Ling Han, then it wasn't strange that he knew about the red devilish soil's secret. Ling Han smiled slightly and didn't argue. Did it matter if there was a celestial king behind him or not? In any case, a celestial king couldn't interfere. He continued the previous topic. If we don't leave, could it be that you're going to use force against us? Shen Hao once again showed a lazy expression. I can't be bothered to make a move. However, I'm lazy, but others won't be like this. Ling Han laughed loudly. You're quite interesting. Yet Shen Hao shook his head. Outsider, don't think that you're very strong. I'll give you a word of advice. On the immortal path, our strength is generally stronger than yours. Obviously, Shen Hao was looking at the sky from the bottom of a well. Though the majority of ascending origin tiers were indeed ordinary, king tiers were already very rare after all. Emperor tiers and monarch tiers were naturally even rarer, and emperor stars were definitely as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. Thus, it was very easy for those on the immortal path to think of outsiders as ordinary ascending origin tiers. If anyone is unconvinced, Niu will beat him into submission. Niu stretched out her small fist and gestured fiercely. She was extremely beautiful, and also exuded the innocence of a young girl. This action didn't have the slightest bit of destructive power, and would only make others feel that she was cute and pure. Shen Hao couldn't help but be dazed for a moment. Only then did his whole body tremble, and he came to his senses. He shrugged indifferently. In any case, I've already persuaded you, so whether you listen or not is your own business. He yawned, looking like he wanted to find a place to lie down and have a good sleep. Second senior brother, who are you talking to? Someone flew down from the cliff in the distance. This was a woman, and her appearance was very alluring, outlined by her form-fitting red dress. Her eyes swept over, and when she discovered Niu and the other two girls, her eyes involuntarily narrowed. Too beautiful. One was noble, one was pure, and one was seductive. Even she would feel a rush of excitement when she saw them. A sliver of killing intent involuntarily rose up in her. There was actually someone who crushed her in terms of appearance. And it wasn't just one, but a whole three. Shen Hao raised his eyebrows slightly, and couldn't be bothered to speak. Outsider. The woman in red swept her eyes over again, and a sliver of a smile appeared at the corners of her lips. But there was a hint of cruelty in it. Outsiders were easy to deal with. If they were killed, then so be it. There was absolutely no need to worry about leaving behind any future trouble. You actually dare to barge in here. You all are seeking death, the woman in red said coldly. With a shake of her hands, there was already a curved saber in each of her hands. Each curved saber was branded with 9 seals, and they were already glowing. She had activated her spirit tool, and this meant that she would not hold back when she attacked. She wanted to kill Ling Han and the others. Firstly, this place did not allow outsiders to interfere at all. And secondly, she was even more jealous of Niu and the other two girls. Thus she immediately drew her sword. Ugly people are prone to mischief. The Empress sneered. Her steps were light, and her slender waist swayed slightly. She was extremely flirtatious, yet graceful and elegant, making one's heart beat, yet not daring to profane her at the same time. This was a goddess that one could only look up to. The woman in red's aura was greatly weakened, and even her back involuntarily bent down. However, she immediately reacted, and instantly flew into a rage out of humiliation. With a delicate shout, she charged towards the Empress. Peng, a red shadow flickered, and she was sent flying back at a speed that was even faster than when she had arrived. Chapter 24:20. The Empress humped softly. Her palms flipped, and multiple power of regulations shot out from her jade-like palms. She herself also turned into the flow of time. One moment in the past, the next moment in the future, so strange that it was impossible to capture. The strength of the woman in red had been greatly boosted under the effects of the Red Devil soil. And because of the Red Devil soil, she was close to the level of being untouchable by all techniques. Thus, it was very difficult for the Empress's regulations of time to affect her. But there was no difficulty in using them on herself. The two of them exchanged blows. Regulations of time lived up to their reputation as the highest level, and were also the main regulations of any plane, so they were incomparably powerful. In the entire battlefield, it was the Empress who was suppressing the woman in red, and the woman in red's counterattacks were all useless, unable to hit her at all. The defeat of the woman in red was only a matter of time, and it would not be long. Humph, you actually dare to come to our North Blue faction to act violently, how audacious! With a long shout, two men arrived together, both of their expressions carrying powerful pride. However, when they saw that the woman in red's hair was disheveled, and her fine black hair had turned gray, they both paled in shock. Was this still their 19th junior sister, who loved beauty as much as her life? 19th junior sister, how did you? Let me help you. The two men charged out at practically the same time, but bewitching Maiden Row humphed softly, and moved to block them. She angrily rebuked the two of them. Stand down. She was proficient in the path of bewitching, but she walked the path of a ruler, making others submit, worship, and revere her, and not the kind that would arouse others' lust. Otherwise, Ling Han would not have tacitly acknowledged her existence. With this shout, the two men looked dazed. Their gazes towards bewitching Maiden Row were at first confused, and then fervent, as if they had met their benefactor of 9 lifetimes, wanting nothing more than to kneel down and worship her, offering their lives without hesitation. Shen Hao's gaze involuntarily froze. These two were both his junior brothers, and their strength had long since reached the peak stage of the ascending origin tier. But that woman was only SOSO, yet she had directly knelt down without a single move. This was completely unacceptable to him. The two men retreated as ordered, yet their eyes were fervently fixed on bewitching Maiden Row. They only had to wait for an order from her, and they would do anything for her. The woman in red almost vomited blood. Didn't the two of you say you were going to help me? Where are you now? In a moment of distraction, she was instantly struck by the Empress's series of attacks. The heaven-destroying 9 swords slashed out, and her whole body was drenched in blood. Her clothes were also torn in several places, and she was in an extremely sorry state. The Empress didn't back down after gaining the upper hand. She lightly raised her slender hand, and another gust of wind shot out from her finger. This gust of wind transformed into a frightening sword chi, and was going to slay the red-robed woman. Have mercy! Shen Hao hurriedly moved. No matter how lazy he was, he couldn't just watch as his junior apprentice sister was killed. Peng! He blocked this attack, and a shocking flush instantly appeared on his originally fair and clean face. It was as if he was drunk. This was because the Empress's sword chi was too powerful. Though he had dispelled it, it had shaken his chi and blood, and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. His face paled in shock. Previously, he had only known that the Empress was very strong, but after receiving this attack, he finally experienced it for himself. No wonder his junior sister was still suppressed by the Empress, even after eating 2 mouthfuls of red demonic soil. The Empress's eyes sharpened, exuding an endlessly domineering aura. She wanted to kill a traitor, and there was actually someone who dared to stand in her way, so she would kill them as well. Ling Han smiled and said, "Wife, stop for a moment." Shen Hao was not a bad person, so it would be a pity if he died. Only then did the Empress give up on the idea. She clasped her hands behind her back, her imperial might and domineering aura spreading out. Bewitching Maiden Ro also giggled and retreated. Only then did those two men seem to have woken up from a dream. They exchanged a look, and could both see the intense shock and lingering fear in each other's eyes. If Bewitching Maiden Ro had told them to kill each other just then, they definitely would have carried it out without hesitation. Now it was uncertain whether they would live or die. When they thought that their lives had been so easily controlled by another, their hearts contracted intensely. Ling Han had just heard those two mention that Songbei faction, and asked Shen Hao, "You two are the disciples of the celestial king Songbei?" The red-clothed woman caught her breath and shouted at Ling Han, "Do you two know fear now?" Ling Han walked towards the red-clothed woman, his eyes clear and calm, but there was a naturally oppressive aura that caused the red-clothed woman to feel as if a large rock was pressing down on her chest. Even breathing was difficult, and her complexion instantly became pale. "You're asking for a beating?" He moved. "Pa!" A slap flew over from a distance. His hand rose, and the force behind it had already arrived. With a crisp sound, the red-clothed woman suddenly staggered in retreat. She opened her mouth and spat out a few broken teeth and fresh blood. "Brother Ling, though this junior sister of mine speaks fiercely, she actually does not have any ill intentions. Please show mercy," Shen Hao hurriedly advised. But he was even more shocked in his heart. This group of four were all powerful, and were completely different from the outsiders that they had imagined. Only now did Ling Han withdraw his gaze, and turn towards Shen Hao with a smile, and said, "You two are claiming territory, and planning to forcibly take over that celestial tree inside. This is the territory of our Blue North bloodline, so the celestial tree naturally belongs to us." One of the men that had been bewitched by Bewitching Maiden Ro previously immediately declared to Ling Han. Ling Han chuckled. "Are you playing with me? Who is playing with you?" That man flew into a rage out of humiliation. He was not a 3-year-old child. Ling Han waved his fist. "The treasures of heaven and earth naturally belong to the person with the biggest fist. I feel that my fist is the biggest. Is there anyone among you who is not convinced?" That man wanted to say something, but his mouth moved, yet he could not say a single word. Ling Han's group was too powerful. He and his companion had not even been able to exchange a single move before they had directly knelt down. Now they did not have the slightest bit of confidence at all. "Brother Ling, even if you chase us away, it is useless." Shen Hao, however, shook his head. "What do you mean?" Ling Han walked over. "Did you see that this mountain fog can prevent people from entering?" Shen Hao pointed at the mountain valley that was surging with fog. "This is the first layer of protection, and after entering, the path is also very dangerous. The closer you get to the celestial tree, the harder it is to approach. Though we have occupied this place, in reality, none of us have actually approached that celestial tree." Ling Han nodded. "I know that. If it was only occupied by others, then it would not be so difficult to obtain the celestial seed, because there was always a possibility that it could be obtained by others. Furthermore, the most difficult obstacle is the celestial tree itself," Shen Hao continued. "I have also heard others say that the celestial tree possesses an astonishing ability to escape, and no power can restrain it. If it is not willing to give the celestial fruit to you, even a celestial king would be helpless." Ling Han naturally would not waver in his determination, just because the other had said these few words. He asked Shen Hao in detail, and very soon, he had a further understanding of this celestial tree. Where did the fragments of the celestial seed come from? It was the pollen that fell from this celestial tree when it bloomed, or the fragrance of its fruits when they were growing, that drifted with the wind and could be obtained by others. Shen Hao and the others had stayed here for two reasons. First, they wanted to obtain a complete celestial seed, but this was too difficult, so they had to settle for second best. They wanted to obtain some of the remnant fruits and leaves that had fallen from the celestial tree. Many a little makes a mickle, and even the incomplete celestial seed could be pieced together into a complete one. Chapter 24-21. In the sky, the sun gradually set in the west, and the bright moon slowly rose. After a long time, the moon was in the middle of the sky, and the mist in the valley suddenly dispersed. "We can go in now." Shen Hao led the way in front, and Ling Han and the others followed behind. The woman in red and the others glared fiercely at the backs of Ling Han and the others, and then turned to leave. They wanted to go back and complain. A few outsiders actually dared to have designs on the celestial tree, and Celestial King Songbei would definitely be furious if he knew. Perhaps he would personally deal with Ling Han and the others. It was very strange. Previously, the valley was covered in mist, and they couldn't even see their fingers if they stretched out their hands, and they would walk out in a daze. But now there was not the slightest bit of mist. Although there was no sunlight, under the bright moonlight, there was an elegant whiteness, and the scenery could be seen very clearly. This part of the road wasn't difficult to walk, and Shen Hao walked very quickly. Ling Han and the others naturally wouldn't trust others so easily. Every step they took fell on the ground that Shen Hao walked on, and they firmly remembered it in their minds. After walking for about 5 kilometers, the front suddenly opened up, as if they had walked into a plain. "There," Shen Hao said, pointing at the mountain wall in the distance. Ling Han and the others all focused their gazes over. They could faintly see a tree growing on the mountain wall. It was no more than 3 feet tall, and its leaves were very dense. In the middle of the leaves, there were 5 bright red fruits. The fruits were covered with indescribable vein patterns, but perhaps because they were too far away, they could not clearly see the exact appearance of the vein patterns. Ling Han quickly shook his head and said, "It shouldn't be because of the distance." The Empress nodded in agreement. "We are at most 3,000 meters away from that celestial tree, but we feel that the tree is blurry. This is not normal. When will the fruits ripen?" Hunyao was more concerned about this. Shen Hao thought for a moment and said, "When the celestial tree bloomed and bore fruit. Even my master hadn't achieved Tao, and this celestial tree has always been unknown, so no one knows the specific time. But in recent months, we can already smell the fruit fragrance, and according to the ancient records, the fruit should ripen within 10 years. "I'm here," he suddenly said, and immediately sat down cross-legged. Ling Han and the other 3 smelled a sweet fragrance. They couldn't tell what it was exactly, but it smelled really good. It made them feel like they were walking on clouds, as if they had become one with the great path. "This fragrance is coming from the immortal tree. Don't miss it. You can cultivate an immortal seed here," warned Shen Hao. Ling Han and the other 3 were curious. The immortal seed fragments were really everywhere. They continued to sit cross-legged to absorb the fragrance and carefully experience it. All kinds of enlightenment surged in his mind, and in his sea of consciousness, a small bright spot formed, as if it was about to give birth to something. "This is the fragment of the immortal seed. It seems like celestial seeds are very easy to cultivate," Hunyao immediately said. Ling Han also felt that it was strange. At this rate, as long as he breathed in a few more breaths of the fragrance, he would be able to condense a complete immortal seed in a few years. Shen Hao asked, and he couldn't help but be flabbergasted when he found out about their situation. "Could it be that all of you have the legendary immortal physique?" After a while, he couldn't help but ask, "What immortal body?" "Immortal physique is a prodigy that is connected to the great Tao, and can easily condense a immortal seed," Shen Hao said. "It is basically impossible for such a person to appear on the celestial path. I heard that only outsiders could possibly have such a monster." Ling Han gave an "oh." This so-called immortal physique should refer to monarch tiers, beings that were destined to become celestial kings. Thus, condensing an immortal seed was especially easy. Through their previous efforts, they had already obtained the recognition of heaven and earth. Condensing an immortal seed and becoming a celestial king was only a process. However, the strength of a celestial king that way was limited, because it was formed from incomplete immortal seeds. So how could it compare to an innately complete immortal seed? When Ling Han explained this to the 3 girls, he also obtained their approval. 3 of them were emperor stars, so it was naturally easier for them to condense an immortal seed, and Ling Han had actually surpassed the category of emperor stars. His evolution index had already broken past 11. They were all nurturing an immortal seed, but this was not a problem. As long as they reached the final step, and did not let the immortal seed germinate in their bodies and grow into a celestial tree, it would be fine. They could abandon it at any time and exchange it for another immortal seed. Nurturing an immortal seed could allow them to experience the Celestial King's Tao in advance, which was very beneficial for their future cultivation. For example, Shen Hao and the others were also condensing an immortal seed while waiting for the celestial fruit to ripen. If they could obtain it, they would not hesitate to exchange it. Ling Han carefully experienced it. Even an incomplete immortal seed represented the laws of heaven and earth and could directly understand the essence. Only by understanding the essence of the laws would one have the right to surpass the laws and become a celestial king. Why don't we go forward a bit? Ling Han suddenly asked. Here, many of the fruit's fragrance had been blown away by the mountain wind. Shen Hao shook his head. There's no other way. It's too dangerous ahead, so we can only stay here. My master came here before. But the moment he came, the celestial tree directly burrowed into the ground. So if we want to obtain an immortal seed, we cannot borrow the power of a celestial king. This was quite interesting. Ling Han did not stay where he was in a daze. He immediately stood up and then walked forward slowly. He was not satisfied with just absorbing a little fruit powder here. Since he also wanted to obtain the fruit in the future, then he had to first explore the path clearly, because the fruit might only ripen 10 years later, or it might ripen tomorrow. This celestial tree needed an entire epoch from blooming to bearing fruit to ripen. Around 10 years' time was like a normal person's breath. It was ridiculously short. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. When Ling Han took the 5th step, he suddenly realized that this valley had changed. Previously, the night light was as clear as jade, but now it was filled with an eerie feeling, as if he had suddenly walked into a ghost cave. This was not a feeling. He saw a gust of yin qi rising from under a rock, and very quickly condensed into a skull. Then it let out a sharp cry, and pounced towards Ling Han. The sharp cry was extremely ear-piercing, as if it was going to forcefully rupture Ling Han's eardrums. Ling Han snorted. The world is bright and clear. How can a demon act viciously? Hurry up and scatter. Pa! That skull immediately exploded. What? Seeing this, Shen Hao's heart could not help but contract. It was not that he had not tried to pass through this place before. He had also faced this skull. Even though he had passed through, he had been in a sorry state, and it had taken him a lot of effort to deal with it. However, Ling Han had shattered the skull with a single roar. The difference in strength was like the difference between heaven and earth. Ling Han did not care if Shen Hao was shocked or not. He continued onwards, and soon, another rock lit up and turned into a sword that slashed towards him. Ling Han punched out, and bang, the sword was instantly shattered. Shen Hao was once again dumbfounded. Back then, he had been forced back by this sword, and he had tried 7 times before he had passed. Ling Han had definitely eaten red devil soil. Otherwise he would really go crazy. Ling Han strode forwards. Every rock and soil here could turn into a powerful weapon that attacked him, but they were all nullified with a single punch and a roar. He was a super emperor star, and putting aside his body techniques, just in terms of laws, his HP was 4,600. Shut up. Those people immediately wanted to fly into a rage, but when they saw the Empress's graceful and noble appearance, their mouths opened and closed, but they couldn't say a single word. Ling Han threw over a dozen punches in a row, and the golden rabbit exploded. His feet paused slightly. The golden rabbit's vitality had reached about 4,500 points, and it should be known that an ordinary cultivator at the peak stage of the consummate level of the ascending origin tier would only have 4,300 points, and only Emperor Stars could barely reach 4,500 points. Ling Han was a super Emperor Star, and that was why he could reach 4,600 points. In other words, this rabbit was enough to make even ascending origin Emperor Stars frown deeply. This thought only flashed through his mind for a moment, and Ling Han continued to advance. Another unremarkable azure rock lit up, and turned into an azure wolf that roared at Ling Han. Xiao xiao xiao. With this roar of the azure wolf, multiple azure blades of wind shot out from its mouth, slicing towards Ling Han. Ling Han didn't retreat, but advanced instead. His fists punched out repeatedly, incredibly domineering. Pung pung pung. He domineeringly charged in front of the Azure Wolf and gave it a good beating. It was only a dozen or so punches, and this Azure Wolf exploded, turning back into an Azure Rock. Strangely, the Azure Rock wasn't the slightest bit damaged. Ling Han was curious and picked up the Azure Rock. After thinking for a moment, he turned around and picked up the golden rock from before as well. When everyone saw this, they all felt an urge to smack their foreheads and cry out to the heavens. They had never seen such a person who even wanted to pick up stones. These were not treasures at all, and they could only display their might in the valley. Meanwhile, Ling Han started to play around with these two stones curiously. However, no matter how much he circulated his power, these two stones didn't react at all, as if they were stubborn rocks. Even if they can't display their might, smashing people with them isn't bad either. Ling Han thought to himself as he put these two stones away. He was extremely excited, and he wanted to collect even more stones. He continued to advance, and more stones took form, attacking Ling Han. The further he went, the fiercer the attacks became. By the time he was about 750 meters away, the stone's HP had already shot up to 4,600. In other words, even a Super Emperor star would reach its limit here. Ahead, there were still 250 meters before he reached the end of the valley. If he went any further, he would reach the celestial tree. Shen Hao shook his head. Even if he ate the red devil earth twice in a row, this was the limit. No one could eat 3 mouthfuls in a row, or their strength wouldn't increase at all. Instead, they would immediately die. The others were filled with anticipation, hoping that Ling Han would continue forward and be killed. Ling Han paused slightly before raising his foot and landing. Wang! A boulder that was as tall as 9 meters suddenly came to life, transforming into a stone golem of the same height. Pung pung pung, it stomped on the ground, causing the earth to tremble. It strode towards Ling Han, a terrifying ferocious aura spreading out. It was as if it was a primordial beast from ancient times, capable of destroying everything. Ling Han didn't dare to be careless, and he activated his most powerful ability, body technique. Pung! He punched out without holding anything back. A terrifying scene appeared. The stone golem was directly smashed apart by a single punch. Damn it! Shen Hao and the others were all petrified, and countless thoughts churned in their hearts. They couldn't understand. Ling Han's battle prowess had clearly reached its limit, so why had he suddenly become so powerful? His battle prowess was almost at the Celestial King level. Could it be that he just ate the Red Devil Earth? Someone asked in a trembling voice. Impossible. The others all shook their heads. If Ling Han hadn't eaten the Red Devil Earth, how could he have become so powerful? He was even more powerful than them after eating the Red Devil Earth. I've heard people say that even though most of the people in the outside world are ordinary, there are some shocking geniuses, someone said leisurely. For example, we're clearly stronger than our peers, and we're called kings. When the others heard this, they all felt quite pleased. This title wasn't bad, and they were very satisfied. But above kings there are 2 more levels, the person from before said. What? The others were stunned. They weren't the most supreme geniuses. Chapter 24-24. Ling Han naturally wouldn't agree to anyone's request. There were too many people in his clan who needed immortals, and he wouldn't complain even if he had 100 immortal fruits, let alone now that he only had 1 extra. Seeing that Ling Han wasn't willing to agree, everyone's eyes were filled with hatred, but no one dared to act out. The difference in strength was too great. However, some people had already left. They were going to complain to Celestial King Songbei. Why should the immortal seeds in their territory be obtained by outsiders? They wanted to ask the Celestial King to act, and force Ling Han and the others to harvest the ripe fruits, and then give them to them. This was even better. Shen Hao sighed. Brother Ling, you guys are too high profile. You're finding trouble for yourselves. What's wrong? Ling Han asked with a smile. You guys have proven that you have the ability to harvest immortal fruits, and no matter how powerful you are, you can't compare to a celestial king. Shen Hao shook his head. My junior brothers and sisters will definitely ask Lord Master to intervene. At that time, you guys will only be helping others, and even your lives will be in danger. Ling Han was surprised. Why did this Shen Hao always side with outsiders? This kind of personality was rare. Brother Shen, you really are a very strange person, he said with a smile. Shen Hao also smiled. This is the kind of personality I was born with. It can't be changed. Ling Han nodded. However, Brother Shen doesn't need to worry for us. Since we've come to the celestial path, we naturally have made preparations. Putting aside his terrifying physique technique, he hadn't used the few origin energy of heaven and earth. It was best to use them to intimidate low-level celestial kings. Shen Hao naturally wouldn't believe him. The leap from the ascending origin tier to the celestial king tier was far, far too great. There was absolutely no one that could accomplish it. However, since Ling Han was determined to do so, he couldn't be bothered to try and persuade him further. This was also his personality. Ling Han and the others sat down, absorbing the fruit fragrance of the celestial tree, and nurturing the immortal seeds in their minds. Time passed day by day, and finally, other people arrived in the valley. These were outsiders. They had entered Songbei City much later, but they still knew about the red devilish soil and the existence of the complete immortal seeds. Thus they also came here trying to try their luck. If he really obtained the complete immortal seed, that would be reaching the heavens in one step. Master Ling! Greetings to Master Ling! Greetings to Master Ling! After discovering Ling Han, everyone hurriedly came over to greet him. A 5-star adept, even more awesome compared to an initial stage immortal king. Who would dare to be disrespectful? Only now did Shen Hao know Ling Han's identity, and he came to a sudden realization in his heart. No wonder Ling Han was so full of confidence, and didn't even fear celestial kings. So it turned out that he was a supreme being that could refine celestial king-grade medicinal pills. With such an identity, even immortal King Songbei would have to show some respect to him. Unless immortal King Songbei could guarantee that he could capture Ling Han without leaking any news, countless immortal kings would definitely attack him. Such a great alchemist was really too useful. More and more people came to the mountain valley, and they were basically king tiers and emperor tiers. Ordinary ascending origin tiers were still struggling on the Rainbow Bridge. It would already be very good if they could pass through in a month or two. As such, with their strength and the help of the Red Devil soil, Shen Hao and the others were unable to stop them, and could only let them in. Thankfully, there were only a few hundred people, so the impact wasn't too great. There were many people who didn't believe that this mountain valley would be so difficult, and insisted on walking on it. The result was naturally that they tormented themselves greatly, and a few people almost died. There were many who had suffered before, and everyone naturally learned their lesson. However, there would always be newcomers who felt good about themselves, and insisted on giving it a try. Ling Han sat down calmly, though he could only absorb some fruity fragrance now, which contained a shred of the celestial seed's fragment. There was actually no difference in quality from a complete celestial seed. Thus, he studied the celestial seed in his mind. His grand cosmic everlasting physique activated, and he accelerated the flow of time on himself. When a complete celestial seed fused with a cultivator, it could grow into a celestial tree, and that would be a first heaven celestial king. And when the celestial tree bloomed and bore fruit, and the seed grew again, that would be a second heaven celestial king. This cycle repeated 9 times, and that would be a 9th heaven celestial king. Every time a celestial seed grew, bore fruit, and became a seed again, it was a kind of transformation of regulations, and it would develop in a more powerful direction. By now, Ling Han was already qualified to touch the threshold of celestial king tier. Thus, he studied the fragment of the celestial seed, attempting to understand the celestial seed and the celestial king tier from a more fundamental level. Unfortunately, this celestial seed in his body was too incomplete at present, and the information he obtained was really only bits and pieces, so he couldn't learn anything from it. Unexpectedly, Celestial King Songbei didn't appear all this time. It was unknown whether it was because he was too busy, or because he couldn't be bothered to suppress a few ascending origin tears. Or perhaps the time was not ripe yet, and he would only appear when the fruits of the celestial tree had completely ripened, and force Ling Han to pick the fruits and hand them over. In the blink of an eye, 7 years had passed. At some point on this day, a fruity fragrance wafted over, but it was as if these celestial fruits were right under their noses, and the fragrance was astonishingly strong. The celestial fruits have ripened. Instantly, everyone's eyes reddened. This was a naturally complete celestial seed, and if one used it to become a celestial king, their battle prowess would be at least 3 times stronger than other celestial kings. 3 times. But though they were only 3,000 meters away from the valley, such a long road was like a natural chasm, and there was absolutely no way they could cross it. They could only stretch their necks, hoping that a fruit would drop down, and then be blown by the mountain wind, and roll to their feet. Wang, just at this moment, a frightening might spread over, and they saw a person slowly walking out of the fog. This was too astonishing. Under the blockade of the fog, someone could actually walk over. Master! Shen Hao and the others all knelt down, and respectfully paid their respects to this person who walked over. This was Celestial King Songbei. No wonder, only Celestial Kings could ignore the blockade of the fog. Ling Han also walked over, and saw that this Celestial King was only in his 20s. He was handsome, and exuded a vigorous heroic spirit, making people admire him. Celestial King Songbei's body was entwined with extraordinary colors, but it was only one color, and this very clearly told everyone that he was a first heaven Celestial King. When a Celestial King appeared, there would be a fragrant fragrance wafting between heaven and earth, and this meant that Celestial Kings were people who had received the love of heaven and earth, unlike heavenly venerables, who would be struck by lightning the moment they came out, and if they made a move, they would be targeted by heaven and earth, and it was not impossible for them to be killed. The red-clad woman and the others followed behind Celestial King Songbei, and they followed his every step with extreme respect. The outsiders also paid their respects. Although some of the factions behind them had second heaven, third heaven, or even stronger celestial kings, at this time and place, they still had to show due respect. Celestial King Songbei raised his head slightly. He had received the worship of all living beings, so he naturally would not care about such reverence. However, his gaze shifted, and he looked at Ling Han and the others. It was very simple, only the 4 of them did not kneel, and it was too sudden. I heard that you're a 5-star alchemist? Celestial King Songbei asked, his tone rather polite. Ling Han nodded. That's right. A 5-star alchemist did not need to lower his head in front of a low-level celestial king at all. Moreover, his own battle prowess was not much weaker than a first heaven celestial king. Combined with his terrifying defense, it was not certain who would win if they really fought. Celestial King Songbei smiled. Are you interested in staying and helping me? Chapter 24-25. Celestial King Songbei extended an olive branch to Ling Han. If it was outside, there would definitely be many people who would mock Celestial King Songbei for overestimating himself. A mere first heaven celestial king wanted to recruit a 5-star grandmaster. Wasn't he afraid that the guests would bully the host? But here, the strongest celestial king was only a 3rd heaven celestial king, which imperceptibly lowered the level of 5-star grandmaster. Thus, Celestial King Songbei's recruitment was not considered abrupt. Ling Han cracked a smile. Thank you for your favor, Brother Songbei, but I only came here to become a celestial king, and have no intention of staying long on the celestial path. As long as he walked the celestial path, he would also be a first heaven celestial king, and added with the title of 5-star grandmaster, he would definitely be much stronger than Celestial King Songbei, so he did not need to be humble in front of the other. Moreover, his present strength was also infinitely close to Celestial King, and if they really fought, it was unknown who would emerge victorious. Celestial King Songbei couldn't help but raise his eyebrows slightly. There was no existence of 5-star grandmaster on the celestial path, so 5-star grandmasters and celestial kings only existed in legends. Now, A mere ascending origin tier directly called him Brother Songbei, which made him feel a wave of displeasure. This was the celestial path, and no matter how powerful one's background was outside, they could not interfere at all. However, being able to become a celestial king, he naturally was not someone who would easily change his expression. So he said calmly, "All right, since Grandmaster Ling's ambition is not here, I will not force you." He paused slightly. "However, this celestial tree belongs to my Songbei bloodline after all. Since Grandmaster Ling has chosen it, I naturally will not be reluctant to part with it, so I will give Grandmaster Ling a fruit." He only said that he would give Ling Han one, but as for the remaining four, that would have to be approved by him. Ling Han was not afraid and said, "Natural treasures should be obtained by fated people and those with strength, right?" When everyone heard this, their hearts beat like drums. Was Ling Han going to publicly shed all pretense of cordiality with Songbei King? Even in the outside world, the status of 5-star grandmasters was respected, but face was also given by cultivators. Even if celestial kings had to be polite, that was only on the surface. If celestial kings really wanted to be polite, the celestial king could ignore them. After all, this is a world where martial artists reign supreme. This was the immortal path. First heaven immortal kings were extremely powerful existences. Yet, Ling Han actually dared to refute immortal King Songbei so directly. This naturally made everyone feel uneasy. Let's put it this way. If Celestial King Songbei really killed Ling Han, which celestial king on the immortal path would bother Celestial King Songbei for a dead 5-star grandmaster? This guy still treated the immortal path as the celestial domain. The title of a 5-star grandmaster was not so useful on the immortal path. The outsiders shook their heads, while the Songbei bloodline revealed looks of anger. Even Shun Hao revealed a solemn expression. Immortal King Songbei was a shrewd man. He did not lose his temper after being rebutted. Instead, he looked at Ling Han coldly and said, "Young man, you are very outstanding. You have achieved outstanding achievements in alchemy at such a young age. And you are also unrivaled in martial art. You will definitely have great achievements in the future. However, if you show off too much, you won't be able to live until then." This was the threat of an immortal king. A terrifying aura circulated, and everyone felt a tightness in their chests. It was indescribably uncomfortable. Ling Han, on the other hand, did not care at all. His physique was so strong that it was even close to the level of a celestial king. It was just an aura, and it wanted to overwhelm him? I'll still say the same thing. Treasures of heaven and earth belong to those who are fated, he said in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing. Celestial King Songbei chuckled, but he reached out with his right hand and grabbed at Ling Han through the air. His source power activated the rules and turned into a huge golden hand. Runes flashed, which was the materialization of the great Tao of heaven and earth. The celestial king had made his move. It was just a small impact, but the sky trembled as if this part of the world was about to collapse. Ling Han's expression did not change. A celestial king of the first heaven was really nothing in his eyes. He had killed many of them, and not just once but 3 times. The strongest celestial king among them had even reached the 5th heaven. Ling Han unfolded his rage fist and circulated the terrifying power in his body. His fist arrived at his heart. Bang! A violent punch blasted toward the huge golden hand. Seeing this, everyone was so shocked that they spat out their tongues. This was the standard case of a mantis trying to stop a chariot. A mere ascending origin tier actually wanted to fight a celestial king head-on? How arrogant was he? "You're courting death," the red-robed woman and the others said coldly. This was especially so for the red-robed woman. She had suffered too many losses, and her black hair could never recover. There were also a few more wrinkles on her face, so she naturally hated Ling Han and his group to the core. The outsiders also shook their heads. From now on, the Eastern Celestial Realm would return to the situation where there were no 5-star grandmasters again. Pung! Just as everyone was immersed in various emotions, Ling Han and Celestial King Songbei also truly clashed. A terrifying gust of wind whistled. This was the collision of the strongest powers of the celestial realm. Celestial venerables had exceeded the scope of the rules, and were not included. Endless brilliance was dazzling, and everyone felt as if they had become blind. They could not see anything, but their ears were filled with rumbling explosions, showing how terrifying the present scene was. But after a short while, their ears had all gone deaf, and they could not hear anything, because these explosions were too terrifying, exceeding the limits of what they could bear. Everyone was bleeding from all orifices, and felt as if their hearts were beating like drums about to explode. Most people only felt uncomfortable, but there were also a few people who revealed indescribable shock. If a celestial king made a move, shouldn't he be able to capture Ling Han in an instant? Regardless of whether it was capturing him alive or killing him, it would definitely only be a matter of raising a hand. But now, there were endless explosions, and the battle was still continuing. What did this mean? Celestial King Songbei still hadn't captured Ling Han? How was this possible? That was only a mere ascending origin tier. Even if he had the title of a 5-star grandmaster, and celestial kings had to be polite to him, it definitely did not mean that his strength could really be on equal footing with celestial kings. At least 15 minutes later, everyone suddenly found that the terrifying pressure was gone, and the vision in front was slowly recovering, and the deafness was also improving. The dust that filled the sky settled, revealing two figures facing each other with their hands clasped behind their backs. Celestial King Songbei and Ling Han. Seeing this scene, everyone was dumbfounded, and even wanted to hold their heads with their hands, shouting that it was impossible. Ascending origin tier rivaled a celestial king, the biggest joke in the world. It was something that they didn't even dare to dream about, but it was happening in reality. Who could believe their eyes? I must have seen wrongly. This can't be happening. It's fake, it's all fake. After a brief silence, there was a tsunami-like clamor. Everyone was speechless, as if hoping that someone would remind them that all this was just a dream. The woman in red was even more dumbfounded. She actually offended such an elite. If Ling Han really wanted to kill her, then so what if it was Celestial King Songbei? He was not afraid at all. Only then did Shen Hao know what Ling Han meant when he said that he was prepared. His strength was strong enough to rival a celestial king, so he naturally had no fear. Your strength is unbelievably strong, Celestial King Songbei said, his tone still calm, but with strong curiosity. Cell phone reading more refreshing. Chapter 24-26. Others only knew that Ling Han was ridiculously strong, and could rival celestial kings. But Celestial King Songbei knew that Ling Han was strong, but his battle prowess was much weaker than his. Ling Han's battle prowess barely reached the level of a first heaven celestial king, and he had cultivated in the first heaven for many years. Now he was already in the late stage of the first heaven, so his battle prowess naturally far surpassed his. Ling Han also knew that Celestial King Songbei's vitality was about 5,400, much higher than his, but with his powerful physique, he could completely resist. Ho, I just had a lucky encounter, Ling Han said calmly. Celestial King Songbei naturally didn't believe that a lucky encounter could allow an ascending origin tier to have the strength to rival a celestial king. He came to a realization. You should be the legendary Emperor Star, and then eat the red demonic soil, so you have such battle prowess. The vitality of an Emperor Star was about 4,500, and after eating the red demonic soil, it could soar to 4,700. If it was used continuously, no matter what the side effects were, the vitality could increase by a large margin, reaching about 4,800. Although this wouldn't reach the level of a celestial king, it wasn't too far away after all. This was the closest possibility that Celestial King Songbei could think of. After all, he was only a first heaven celestial king, and was not qualified to come into contact with the unique power of heaven and earth. Even if there was a lot of red demonic soil here, celestial kings using the red demonic soil had no effect at all. This was the setting of heaven and earth. Ling Han shrugged. Think what you want. He paused and said, if you want to fight, I'll keep you company. If not, don't disturb my work. These words were very rude, and he almost said that if he didn't want to fight, He should hurry up and get lost. Celestial King Songbei's eyes involuntarily narrowed. Ever since he became a Celestial King, even a second heaven or third heaven Celestial King had not spoken to him in such a tone. His killing intent rose, and he stared closely at Ling Han. His index finger moved slightly, and the thought of killing this young genius rose in his mind, and could not be stopped. "Young man, you are too arrogant," he said darkly. Ling Han laughed, cracked his neck and shrugged. "If you want to fight, then hurry up. Don't be so long-winded." His body technique was incomparably terrifying. With this movement, it was as if an ancient giant beast had awoken. The air trembled, and waves of energy surged in all directions. Pung pung pung. Wherever the energy surged, everyone seemed to be drunk. They staggered, and many people had already fallen to the ground on their butts. One had to realize that those who could reach this place were all ascending origin tiers. Only then did everyone have a deeper understanding that Ling Han indeed possessed the strength to rival immortal kings. This was too inconceivable. He had just stepped onto the path of immortality, yet he already possessed the power of a celestial king. Then, once he cultivated the celestial seed and truly stepped into the celestial king realm, just how powerful would he be? Just thinking about this possibility made it hard for everyone to breathe. This man had created a record that no one would ever be able to break. Immortal King Songbei snorted. His hands turned into claws that emitted a golden glow. He had cultivated metal element regulations, and was also connected to metal element regulations. In other words, he was a part of metal element regulations. With this move, endless metal element regulations surged over, wrapping around his body and turning into 99 golden dragons. They were awe-inspiring, displaying the demeanor of a celestial king. Celestial kings could all use regulations themselves. However, the higher their cultivation level, the more regulations they could use, and their battle prowess would naturally be stronger. And regulations were the materialization of the power of heaven and earth. They were a kind of regulations that represented the will of heaven and earth. The wrath of a celestial king was equivalent to the wrath of heaven and earth, which was indescribably terrifying. Everyone lay on the ground, but as long as they had cultivated a shred of celestial seed, they could resist this kind of might. Ling Han was interested. Although he had killed celestial kings before, he had always relied on external power. It was either the power of heaven and earth of the neutral zone, or the might of the Black Tower. This time, could he rely on his own power to kill a celestial king? Immortal King Songbei moved, and his claws struck out. They continued to expand, and it was as if the whole world was only left with a golden color. Ling Han roared, and his fist moved again. He was incredibly powerful, and he clashed head-on with Immortal King Songbei, not cowering at all. The two of them fought from the ground to the sky. Below, the spectators could only see endless flashes of light, as well as the continuous thunderous booms. Some people wanted to rise into the sky to watch from a closer distance, but they discovered that they couldn't, because the surroundings were filled with the supreme might of Ling Han and Immortal King Songbei. If they rose into the sky, they would be severely wounded, and if they forcefully rose into the sky, they would be making an enemy of a celestial king. Naturally, they would only be reduced to ashes. In the sky, Ling Han used all of his abilities and fought to his heart's content. Celestial kings had a higher level of regulations, and thus Immortal King Songbei extracted a large amount of metal element regulations, completely filling this place. Ling Han couldn't use any regulations at all, and although he had a celestial physique and could use the flow of time, he couldn't receive replenishment from the power of heaven and earth, and was also in danger of being exhausted. Thus, on the level of regulations, Ling Han was completely suppressed, but this didn't matter, because he wasn't fighting with the power of regulations in the first place. On the contrary, without the interference of regulations, he could fully focus on his body techniques. Every punch and kick was exerted by his physical strength, allowing him to better use this kind of power. He became stronger the more he fought, and sometimes, he even traded injury for injury. His fighting style was completely unreasonable. There was nothing that could be done. His physique was too strong, and his normal defenses were equivalent to the lowest level celestial king. And once he actively channeled the indestructible heaven scroll, his defenses could soar to a whole new level, and he could completely take the attacks of celestial kings head-on. Even immortal King Songbei felt a headache. He had never seen such an opponent before. He clearly had celestial king tier-level battle prowess, yet still traded injury for injury, and fought with the intention of perishing together with him. And what made him feel even more helpless was that Ling Han's defenses were incredibly strong and could completely take his attacks head-on. This made him slightly wary when he attacked, and he didn't dare to go too deep. If Ling Han seized the opportunity to make a rash move, it was really possible that he would be wounded. A celestial king being wounded by an ascending origin tier. What kind of great humiliation was this? Now that he had reservations when attacking, it was even more difficult for immortal King Songbei to suppress Ling Han. He couldn't break the stalemate, and the battle was in a stalemate. At the beginning, immortal King Songbei still had extravagant hopes, and that was that Ling Han couldn't possibly maintain such a state after taking the Red Devil soil. But they had already fought for 2 hours, and Ling Han was still full of vigor. This made him feel that something was wrong. He was slightly annoyed. After attacking for so long, he still couldn't suppress Ling Han, and he was really embarrassed. Why was this brat so ferocious? Immortal King Songbei's heart was filled with curiosity. Now, he could confirm that Ling Han hadn't taken the Red Devil soil, but had used another method to achieve a leap in battle prowess. This made his heart thump, and a strong desire rose in his heart. He definitely had to obtain this kind of secret technique. It would definitely increase his battle prowess countless times, and it would be a cinch for him to suppress a second heaven celestial king and rival a third heaven celestial king. Humph! Immortal King Songbei's figure paused slightly, and a celestial tree materialized behind him. He muttered an incantation, and a golden moon rose from the top of the tree, illuminating a myriad of golden shadows. Ling Han was astonished. He discovered that his body seemed to have been frozen, and he couldn't move at all. Immortal King Songbei had unleashed a powerful move. Chapter 24-28. No matter how strong Celestial King Songbei was, he was only a first heaven celestial king, and there was still a long way to go before becoming a heavenly venerable. How could he be a match for such ferocious might? He stretched out his right hand, and a shield immediately formed in front of him. Pung! The sword chi slashed on the shield. With a crisp sound, the shield immediately shattered, and the sword chi continued to slash at him almost unhindered. Celestial King Songbei was shocked. He didn't expect that the sword chi alone would have such terrifying destructive power. The defense he had set up was completely useless. He hurriedly tilted his head, and the sword chi passed. Shwa! The sword chi slashed, and a few strands of hair quietly fell. Celestial King Songbei actually had a few strands of hair cut off by Ling Han. When the people below saw this, they all felt their hands and feet go cold, and their scalps go numb. Heavens, that was a celestial king, but a few strands of hair were actually cut off by Ling Han. Although it was only a few strands of hair, celestial kings were high and mighty, and in the eyes of everyone, they were invincible gods of war. But a few strands of hair were cut off by a sword. How could they accept this? This was nature-defying, really nature-defying. Celestial King Songbei's expression was cold, and there was no trace of anger on his face. There was only incomparable calmness. Which of those who could become celestial kings didn't have iron-like willpower? This technique is very shocking, he said sincerely. It was really hard to imagine that it could even make him lose a few strands of hair. He was a celestial king, and he had this kind of tolerance to admit it. Ling Han laughed and shook his sword. You don't want to say no, do you? I have never been afraid of a battle, Celestial King Songbei said proudly. In a battle of equals, he had never been afraid. Then let's fight. Ling Han charged out. The divine demon sword was infused with Suzi's energy, and could explode with terrifying power for a short time. So he was confident that he could even defeat a celestial king. Celestial King Songbei had seen the power of the divine demon sword, so he didn't dare to face it head-on. He retreated, and then clapped his hands repeatedly, shooting out huge palms that were like mountains, suppressing toward Ling Han. Ling Han casually blasted out sword chi. Pung pung pung. Every sword chi cut off the huge palms, and the palms would immediately shatter, unable to withstand even a single blow. He rushed straight in and chased after immortal King Songbei. The people on the ground were about to faint from shock. Who exactly was the celestial king tier? How could it be that an ascending origin tier had cut down a celestial king tier to the point where he could barely breathe? His outlook on life was about to collapse. In fact, Ling Han still had an even stronger trump card that he hadn't used yet. That was the astral chi of heaven and earth. It could even kill initial stage immortal kings. But now that he had the upper hand, he naturally did not want to waste such a great killing weapon. After all, he did not have much vital energy of heaven and earth. Celestial King Songbei roared in fury as he unleashed his ultimate techniques. However, in front of the divine demon sword, all his techniques were useless. On the contrary, right now, Ling Han could seriously threaten him. But he couldn't do anything to Ling Han. With his battle prowess, if he wanted to seriously injure Ling Han, he would have to continuously attack him several hundred times. But how was that possible? After battling for another 3 days, Celestial King Songbei finally showed fear. Ling Han's stamina was endless. Although the divine demon sword would soon exhaust its power, it could be replenished endlessly, so he could not find a way to break through at all. Moreover, under Ling Han's continuous attacks, he was also struck a few times by the sword chi. His body was riddled with wounds, and his celestial king blood spilled out. Don't waste it. Ling Han moved to collect the blood that Celestial King Songbei had dropped. Although this was not the blood essence of a celestial king, it was still incredibly precious, and was not much inferior to Celestial King tier great herbs. Celestial King Songbei's face turned green in fury. You collect my blood right in front of me. How can you do this? The people on the ground were also speechless. What kind of person was this? He was attracting hatred like this. Was he trying to form a death feud with Celestial King Songbei? Fine. Celestial King Songbei's whole body trembled. He shot back, an endless golden light surged, transforming into golden mountains in front of him to block the sword chi. He gritted his teeth, and actually turned to leave. He did not even care about the face of a celestial king. He understood that if he continued like this, he could not possibly kill Ling Han. Instead, he would put himself in danger, so it was better not to fight. Of course, he would definitely not give up. Xiao! He left with a sky full of divine light, and disappeared in an instant. Everyone was speechless. A celestial king had actually been beaten and fled. Who could believe it? Even if they saw it with their own eyes, they still felt like they were in a dream. If they heard it from others, they would definitely think it was an incredibly lame joke. Ling Han withdrew his sword, and stood there, not chasing after him. Firstly, his target was the celestial fruit, and secondly, he could not catch up to him. In fact, his battle prowess was slightly weaker than that of a celestial king. It was only because the divine demon sword was too domineering now that he had achieved such a glorious result. Otherwise, he should not have been able to do anything to Celestial King Songbei, and Celestial King Songbei should not have been able to kill him. Husband, Ling Han, Hu Niao and the other 2 women all rushed over. Although Ling Han had even killed a celestial king in the past, for safety's sake, they had long since entered the Black Tower, and did not witness it. Moreover, this time was the true manifestation of Ling Han's strength, which was even more rare and valuable, causing them all to be incredibly excited. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "All right, let's go pluck the fruit." And the 3 women all nodded. The 4 of them were already familiar with the path, and soon charged to the foot of the mountain. Then, they climbed up the cliff, and arrived beside the celestial tree. Ling Han stretched out his hand first, and at the same time, was prepared to intercept. If this celestial tree wanted to flee, he would decisively attack, and snatch the celestial fruit. The celestial tree swayed lightly, and endless celestial chi rose, incredibly magnificent. Pa! A celestial fruit automatically left the tree, and landed in Ling Han's hand. Once a celestial fruit landed in the hands of a living being, it had to be ingested in the shortest time possible, or refined into a celestial. Otherwise, it would very quickly evaporate into the heaven and earth. Ling Han immediately swallowed the fruit. He did not need to let the celestial seed germinate and grow, but he could observe the celestial seed in his mind and grasp the Tao of a celestial king in advance. In fact, he wanted to gather the essence of many celestial seeds and forge the most perfect celestial seed, an invincible seed. He moved aside, and the Empress took her place. The Empress similarly stretched out her hand, looking domineering as if saying, "If you dare not give it to me, I'll beat you to a pulp." The celestial tree trembled lightly, and another fruit fell. The Empress caught it and directly swallowed it. She giggled and said, "Damn tree, if your fruit isn't tasty, Nyo will burn you." The celestial tree swayed again, as if expressing its dissatisfaction, but a fruit still fell. Nyo caught it and began to eat it. This taste was not bad, and the little girl's eyes immediately lit up. She stretched out her hand and continued to beg, "Nyo wants more." Everyone below was envious and speechless. There was no benefit to having too many of these celestial seeds, and she had really become addicted to eating them. The celestial tree was unwilling to give her a second fruit, so Nyo could only sulk, and took Bewitching Maiden Rose's place. However, when Bewitching Maiden Rose stepped forward, the celestial tree swayed, and only dropped a fruit after a long time, as if it was hesitating whether to give it or not. This should be because Bewitching Maiden Rose's performance was barely satisfactory, and had not completely won the celestial tree's approval. But at least she had not disappointed it. At this moment, Ling Han stretched out his hand again. There was naturally no reason to waste a celestial fruit for nothing. It was more refreshing to read on his phone. Chapter 24-29. The immortal tree shook gently, but no immortal fruit fell. It seemed to be saying that Ling Han had already taken one immortal fruit, and it was not willing to give more. Ling Han smiled and said, "I will refine it to become an immortal. I will not waste it." As soon as he said this, the immortal tree shook again, and then did something that Ling Han did not expect. It pulled up its roots, and then a few thick roots coiled together, as if forming a few legs. Then it ran away. The speed was so fast that it had already escaped to the horizon in just a few steps. Although Ling Han was ready to attack, he only knew why immortal King Songbei did not attack when the immortal tree moved. He could not stop it. It was too fast. The immortal tree did not have strong combat power, and its defense was not strong, but its speed was the best among immortal kings. Perhaps only immortal kings above the fifth heaven could successfully attack it. This was naturally impossible on the immortal path. There was not even a fourth heaven immortal king, let alone a fifth heaven immortal king. Ling Han sighed. He had to find another immortal tree. "Let's go." They descended the cliff, and everyone looked at Ling Han with incredible reverence. This was someone who could force away even a celestial king, and he had not even become a celestial king yet. Once he stepped into this cultivation level, just how powerful would his battle prowess be? The strongest immortal king in history. Ling Han's eyes swept over them. Minor characters like the woman in red had long since fled. Clearly, they were afraid that Ling Han would settle the score with them later. Even a celestial king had retreated, so what did they amount to? Let's go to Songbei City. Since he had already fought with immortal King Songbei, there was no need to be polite. Ling Han brought the three women to Songbei City, broke into the immortal king's residence, and plundered everything. However, immortal King Songbei had only been enlightened for a few billion years. He had too many disciples and grand-disciples. Therefore, his wealth was not very shocking. This made Ling Han and the others mutter that this immortal king was too poor. If immortal King Songbei heard this, he would probably vomit blood. "You guys are too much." This celestial king did not return to his residence. It was unknown where he went, but Ling Han did not care. At most, they would just fight again. How big is Songbei City? The news of the immortal king manor being raided immediately spread throughout the entire city. Everyone was speechless. Who would have thought that the outsiders would actually be so ferocious? To think that even an immortal king would be forced to flee. Many people still didn't believe it. They ran to the outside of the Celestial King residence and discovered that the guards had indeed run away. Only then did they believe it. After raiding the house, Ling Han and the other three continued on their way. The immortal path would only open once every 10 billion years. This was the arrangement of the heavens and earth. In that case, it was highly likely that there would be many immortal trees blooming and bearing fruit at the same time. Thus, Ling Han decided to set off as soon as possible. Otherwise, people like Ji Wuming, who had the help of the red devilish soil, were more than qualified to obtain the immortal seed. If he didn't hurry up, he would only end up with nothing. They continued on their way. Ling Han and the others nurtured the immortal seed and experienced the changes from ascending origin tier to celestial king tier. After consuming the immortal fruit, there was only a brand inside, and this was the true immortal seed. If one used their own will to nourish it and communicate with the great Tao, it would sprout and eventually grow into an immortal tree. Ling Han and the others all had greater goals and did not plan to transform this brand into an immortal seed. Instead, they placed it in their minds and carefully comprehended it. Because they were raiding the celestial king Songbei, they lagged behind the other outsiders. After another dozen or so days, they arrived at the next city. There was also a celestial king guarding this city. Ling Han first made some inquiries and discovered that there was no immortal tree here. Thus, they did not make any stops and continued on their way. They might as well just hire a carriage, and the entire journey was leisurely and leisurely. Either way, they had a means of transportation, and they themselves were comprehending in the carriage. A naturally complete immortal seed contained too many secrets. Even though it was just an imprint, it could produce countless possibilities. If we can comprehend the secrets of this immortal seed, we might be able to comprehend the secrets of a celestial king in advance, and be able to use the power of a celestial king to a certain extent, Ling Han said. The three women all nodded. This brand was naturally nurtured by heaven and earth, and contained the secrets of becoming a celestial king. Only by comprehending the secrets within could they possibly transform the brand into a celestial seed, germinate and grow. And the key to everything was actually the first step, comprehending the secrets of a celestial king, and then relying on the celestial seed to communicate with heaven and earth, extracting the most fundamental regulations. Without the celestial seed, the celestial king tier was like an illusion that could not be reached at all. But now that they had the celestial seed, they finally touched the threshold of the celestial king tier. Though it was only a threshold, and there was still a long way to go. Time passed day after day, and they all felt that their strength had improved to a certain extent. For Ling Han, this kind of improvement was actually not of much help to his peak battle prowess, because if he did not become a celestial king, his vitality in terms of regulations could not possibly surpass 5,000 points, and his body techniques were still stronger. The four of them all reached a consensus. There should be a transitional level between the celestial king tier and the ascending origin tier, and they could be called pseudo-celestial kings. The strength of a pseudo-celestial king could be infinitely close to that of a celestial king, but could not truly come into contact with it, because once one's vitality reached 5,000 points, they would become a celestial king. A few months later, they arrived at a new city, and there was explosive news here that a complete celestial seed had appeared. That was in the depths of a deserted garden, and looking at it from afar, they could see a celestial plant that bore a celestial fruit, and its fragrance could be smelled for hundreds of miles. A great many people were cultivating outside the garden, absorbing the fragmented celestial seed in the fragrance of the fruit, and finally piecing together a celestial seed. It was rumored that the closer one was to the center of the celestial realm, the closer the celestial seed that appeared would be to flawless and perfect. Ling Han and the others immediately set out, heading towards that garden. However, after traveling for only 3 days, the road ahead of them was cut off. The mountain path was rugged, and there was an indescribable power circulating, stopping the carriage from advancing. Thus, Ling Han had the carriage driver wait where he was, while he continued to advance with the 3 women. Little Terror's expression was listless. After coming to the celestial road, his condition had not been very good. Perhaps it was because he was too close to the center of the celestial realm, causing him, a battle beast from the foreign realm, to be suppressed even more. The four of them traveled for more than half a day, and had already arrived at the waist of the mountain. The area had suddenly opened up, and an astonishingly large ruin appeared. This should have once been a beautiful and holy palace, but now the majority of the buildings had already been destroyed, and only broken walls that were less than half the height of a person and stone pillars that had fallen to the ground were left. However, one could still see the grandeur and majesty of the past. Through these broken walls, they could see that there was a garden in the deepest part of the palace. That place was already deserted, but there was still a plant that was as green as jade growing there. Its leaves were like swords, and there was a dense purple aura entwined around it. One look was enough to tell that it was extraordinary, and at the top of this plant, there was a crimson fruit, which was even more extraordinary. There was actually lightning entwined around it, and even though this kind of lightning was so far away, it still caused a strong sense of fear to rise in one's heart, as if they were facing a heavenly tribulation. A thunder attribute celestial seed. Ling Han and the others all said with certainty. Celestial seeds also had attributes. For example, the celestial seeds that they had obtained before were all of the wood attribute. It should have been a celestial tree or celestial herb that could only bear celestial seeds of the same attribute. Chapter 2430. Looking around again, there were really many people here. As far as the eye could see, there were pitch-black human heads everywhere. Of course, there were also anomalies, people with red, green, gold, and even more messy hair. These were basically ferocious beasts in human form. Though they had the appearance of humans, they were still not the same. Now, everyone was incredibly quiet, sitting around that dilapidated garden. It was as if there was a celestial king inside passing on his cultivation and discussing Tao, imparting supreme ultimate techniques. No one tried to barge into the garden and pluck the celestial fruits. They behaved abnormally obediently. Ling Han glanced at the three women and nodded. Let's go. The four of them strode forward. They already had the mark of the celestial seed, and with comprehension, their strength had improved, advancing towards the level of pseudo-celestial king. Now they really did not fear anyone. Don't you know the rules? They were just about to step over others, and were immediately reprimanded by the person in front. Ling Han smiled. There are rules here. Of course, that person said proudly. Without enough strength, you are not qualified to enter here at all. There's no one over there, stay there. He pointed at a corner. Ling Han walked over. That was already outside the garden, and there were also many people sitting cross-legged there. However, there was clearly a lot of empty space in the garden, yet they did not take a step forward. Obviously, those were all people with low strength, so they could only sit outside. The fragrance of the fruits that they could smell from there would definitely be much weaker. Ling Han turned around, smiled, and said, I am very strong. Pooh. That person snickered. He had really never seen such a thick-skinned person, actually boasting like this. Greetings, Grandmaster Ling. Their conversation also alarmed the nearby people. When an outsider reached Ling Han, he hurriedly stood up and respectfully bowed to him, the reverence and fervor on his face almost overflowing. Ling Han nodded very casually. What is your name? I am Fu Dong. That person hurriedly said excitedly, though he was also in the ascending origin tier, and could possibly advance into the celestial king tier. In front of Ling Han, he was willing to be a lackey. There was no helping it. Ling Han was not only a 5-star grandmaster, his own battle prowess was even more terrifying. In the future, he would definitely become the strongest celestial king, so he would definitely be one of them. Ling Han gave an "oh," then smiled and said, Brother Fu. Fu Dong was even more excited, who said that Ling Han was not easy to talk to. He was very polite. Those gossipers, they're just jealous. When the first person saw this, his expression involuntarily changed. He was a native of the Path of Immortals, so he naturally didn't know or recognize Ling Han. However, he knew of Fu Dong, because Fu Dong had fought his way in with true strength, proving that he was qualified to stay here and cultivate. However, such an expert was actually bowing and scraping in front of Ling Han, as if he was completely willing to be his subordinate. This was enough to prove how powerful Ling Han was. He couldn't help but feel a wave of lingering fear. If he were to fight with Ling Han, he would definitely be asking to be humiliated. He quickly lowered his head like a tortoise. "Hey, what are you sticking your head into the ground for?" Hunyo said delicately. He actually dared to ignore her Ling Han. So Nyo was very angry and wanted to add insult to injury. That person didn't even let out a fart and pretended not to hear anything. Though this was humiliating, it was still much better than being beaten up in public. Ling Han only smiled and didn't take it to heart. He merely stared at the jade-like celestial tree, which was exuding dense purple qi, noble and extraordinary. He asked Fu Dong about the origins of this celestial tree, but the latter didn't know either. He had only been here for a month, and only knew that the depths of the garden were extremely dangerous, and no one could enter. "Do you notice those broken weapons?" Fu Dong pointed at the few weapons scattered around the celestial tree. They were respectively a sword, a saber, a spear, and a halberd, all stabbed into the ground, but every weapon was already damaged, obscuring their former glory. If you get too close, these weapons will unleash their might. They're very terrifying. Fu Dong still had lingering fear, and his face was slightly pale. "I saw it with my own eyes." There was a person who was full of confidence in his own strength, and wanted to force his way in. In the end, that broken saber slashed out automatically, and divine light illuminated tens of thousands of miles, directly killing that person in both body and spirit. Ling Han nodded. If there wasn't strong enough protection, this celestial tree wouldn't have survived until he arrived. "I'll give it a try," Ling Han said to the three women. The three women all nodded. They knew that Ling Han's present strength was almost at the celestial king tier, and added with the might of the divine demon sword, even a first heaven celestial king would be chased away, so he naturally had the right to give it a try. Fu Dong also wore a fervent expression. He was also full of confidence in Ling Han. He was a witness of the battle between Ling Han and celestial king Songbei. Although his strength wasn't very impressive, he had personally seen celestial king Songbei escape. Wasn't that enough? The guy who had been scared out of his wits just now showed a sinister smile. "You want to charge in and pluck the fruit? You're seeking death." Peng He felt a sharp pain in his head, and he was forcefully smashed to the ground. He flew into a rage, and hurriedly crawled back up, only to see that Hunyo was currently clenching her small fist and glaring at him angrily. He was just about to fly into a rage, yet suddenly felt a chill in his heart. Although he had been caught off guard, what kind of strength did she have to be able to defeat him with a single punch? Thinking of this, his anger immediately receded like the tide, and he once again lowered his head like a coward. Ling Han didn't care about this kind of trivial matter at all. He simply stared ahead, and then strode forward. His main goal was naturally to pluck the celestial fruit, but the 4 damaged weapons were also within the scope of his plunder. They could easily kill ascending origin tiers, and most likely, these 4 weapons were forged from divine metal. Although they were damaged, they still possessed very powerful might. He wasn't interested in celestial tools, but divine metal could be swallowed by the divine demon sword, and it could continue to evolve. Another one has come to seek death. Hee, foolish outsider. He probably thinks that he's very strong, but he's forgotten that this is the celestial road. As he walked, many people smirked coldly, but because they discovered that Ling Han was heading for the celestial tree, they didn't stop him. In any case, he was going to be killed soon, so why bother? Ling Han's eyes swept over them, and a terrifying pressure instantly caused everyone to shut their mouths. These natives looked at each other, and could all see the shock and even fear on each other's faces. How could there be such a strong person in this world? It made them feel as if they had been glared at by a celestial king, and their bile was about to flow out. Ling Han withdrew his gaze, and continued to advance. Wang, he stepped within 30 meters of the celestial tree, and a dazzling light immediately rose from the ground. Multiple vein-like patterns appeared on the ground, and after piecing together, They formed an incredibly complicated seal. Ling Han was shocked. He discovered that the scenery around him had instantly changed. The damaged pillar became whole, incredibly tall, and the broken wall recovered like white jade. It was covered with exquisite patterns, exuding a divine aura. Flowers bloomed, and green leaves were like jade. It was like a celestial realm in the mortal world. Ling Han knew that this was a scene from the prosperous period of this place in the past. Unfortunately, some unforeseen event had occurred, and this place had become ruins. He activated the power of time, trying to trace back history. The scene changed, and there really were scenes from ancient times appearing. Chapter 2432. Ling Han was too lazy to bother, so he directly challenged the 4 damaged weapons. Of course, this wasn't because he was too arrogant, but because he was confident that as long as these 4 weapons didn't unleash their strongest attack, he could completely match their combined strength. Wang wang wang. The other 3 weapons also came to life. The broken sword, the broken saber, and the broken halberd floated in the air. Together with the broken spear, they formed a formation and attacked Ling Han. The combined might of these 4 weapons definitely surpassed the simple superposition of their might. Thinking back to when the 4 celestial artifacts were still in their prime, which celestial king could match them? How was this place destroyed? Was it the work of a celestial venerable? Logically speaking, it was impossible for a 9th heaven immortal king to appear on the immortal path. Could it be that this was a part of the immortal domain that left the immortal domain and was swallowed up by the immortal path? Or could it be that the immortal path was originally in the immortal domain, and there was no such thing as opening or closing? These thoughts flashed in Ling Han's mind in an instant. He didn't have the time to think too much about it now, and he just roared without end as he fought the 4 immortal artifacts. Including the divine demon sword, there were actually 5 celestial tools in this place. This was extremely astonishing. Ling Han used his full strength. He did not borrow the power of the plain scroll because he felt that his own strength was enough to suppress these 4 immortal weapons. Fight, fight, fight. He was fighting to his heart's content. His opponent's defense far surpassed his, and he couldn't injure them at all. This allowed him to attack without any misgivings. This feeling was very good. Ling Han mainly used his physical skills to suppress his opponent, supplemented by various rules. His combat strength was so strong that it made people's hair stand on end. However, after only 1,000 moves, the 4 celestial weapons stopped at the same time. The light patterns dimmed, and they fell to the ground one after another. This time, they were no longer stuck in the ground but lay flat, as if they had lost their spirituality. Wang. A thought suddenly entered Ling Han's mind and took the form of a human. Ling Han was instantly astonished. This was the female immortal king that he had met in the past. Fated one, for you to be able to find me and hear my words, it means that not only is your talent outstanding, you have also obtained the devouring metal. The female immortal king spoke. This was only a strand of her consciousness, and what she transmitted was naturally her divine will. You might be able to become an Empyrean. These 4 weapons of mine that I used in the past can also be fused with the devouring gold metal, allowing it to reach a higher level. Senior, may I know your name? Ling Han asked. The female immortal king didn't bother with him and continued. The immortal realm looks calm and peaceful on the surface, but in reality, danger lurks everywhere. There are terrifying enemies lurking in the shadows. If you can become an Empyrean, I hope that you will be able to sweep away the enemies and completely resolve the external threats of the immortal realm. Also, I was killed when my son was just born. It's a pity that I couldn't watch him grow up. If you are fated to meet my son, tell him that I miss him very much. My son's name is Yuan Sheng, and the one who killed me is titled Jie Wu. After speaking, the female immortal king's silhouette flickered and vanished. This was only a strand of her consciousness that she had left in the immortal weapon. Now that she had transmitted her will, she naturally wouldn't be able to meet him again. Ling Han was so shocked that he couldn't say anything. Could this female immortal king be the mother of the fate-born heavenly lord? It was extremely possible. No matter what, the descendants of immortal kings, should be extremely powerful. This was especially so since this female immortal king was so powerful. In that case, out of the famous Yuan Sheng in the future, there should only be one fate-born heavenly lord, right? Also, if this wasn't the case, back then when Ling Han almost traversed the eons to communicate with this female immortal king, why would the heavens and earth forcefully break off their connection? Because this involved an empyrean, an existence that transcended the laws of nature. Once the path of the fate-born heavenly lord's growth was changed, the entire history would be turned upside down. Under such an intense impact of the flow of time, even the entire plane might be destroyed. Hence, the heavens and earth had to stop it. Also, the fate-born heavenly lord's mother had been killed by the 9th Empyrean. Could it be that that old fellow had divined that the fate-born heavenly lord would affect his future plans? So he wanted to get rid of the fate-born heavenly lord in advance, even before he was born? But even Empyreans were unable to completely divinate every scene in the future. So, he had killed the fate-born heavenly lord's mother, but the fate-born heavenly lord had already been born. Indeed, there was the joyless heavenly lord, who had ambushed the experts of the other realms. And then there was the fate-born heavenly lord, who had sacrificed himself to obstruct the other realms, for another 8 epochs. This proved that the 9th Empyrean's actions weren't wrong, they were just a bit too late. That old bastard. Ling Han gritted his teeth in hatred. The 9th Empyrean had truly done many immoral things. He had once been hunted down by him, and this was 2 previous grudges added together. This caused Ling Han's teeth to itch uncontrollably. Please do not worry, Senior. You can also be considered my master ancestor. The grudge between you and Master, as well as myself, is a blood feud between us, and that 9th old bastard for 3 generations. I will definitely kill this thief with my own hands. Ling Han murmured. This was not only a consolation for the female immortal king, but also a kind of confidence. He would definitely surpass the 9th Empyrean, and get rid of this old bastard. He reached out and grabbed, and the 4 immortal artifacts all landed in his hands. The immortal kings had already dispersed, and these 4 weapons were only immortal artifacts now. They could no longer be revived, and they were also damaged. He was not in a hurry to refine them. Ling Han took another step forward, arriving in front of the immortal tree. He reached out, grabbing towards that fruit. The immortal tree swayed lightly, and lightning instantly spread out densely like a spiderweb. Then it turned into a bolt of lightning that struck out. Ling Han hurriedly punched out to meet it. An electric current immediately flowed through his body, causing his entire body to tremble, and his bones almost fell apart. What powerful attack power! Ling Han was slightly surprised. There were very few immortal trees that had an offensive attribute, and they all ran very quickly. But this immortal tree was the opposite. It did not run, and was extremely fierce. Afraid of you? Ling Han reached out again, and the might of his body technique was unleashed to the extreme. Endless aura flowed. The immortal tree trembled, and that immortal fruit actually fell. This Ling Han was speechless. This immortal tree was completely a paper tiger. He had only revealed a bit of his power, and it had already backed down, which fully showed what a coward was. However, since the immortal fruit had already been offered, Ling Han would not go too far. He put the immortal fruit away, and did not make things difficult for that immortal tree anymore. Since it had touched his hand, it could only be consumed by him, or refined into an alchemical pill. Using a naturally complete celestial seed to refine an alchemical pill? That was too wasteful. And this immortal tree had only produced 1 immortal fruit, and it was even closer to the center of the celestial path. So it was obvious that this immortal fruit was even more precious. Ling Han did not hesitate, and directly swallowed it. Is it delicious? Hunyo came over almost drooling. She was not jealous that Ling Han had obtained an even better immortal seed, but rather that it was a pity that she had not tasted such a delicacy. It's not very good. Ling Han bared his teeth. Flashes of lightning were wreaking havoc in his mouth, and there was even a zzz sound. Hunyo was instantly amused and laughed loudly. She was a glutton, but a fruit that had lightning mixed in it. So just thinking about it, the taste could not possibly be very good. and the surrounding people all looked at Ling Han with envious eyes. This guy had not only obtained a complete immortal seed, he had even obtained 4 damaged immortal tools. Don't say that these immortal tools were all damaged, but if they were melted back into the furnace and refined again, any one of them would be able to shine with divine might again. Chapter 24:33. Although the immortal fruits had already been plucked, there were still some people who stayed behind. It was because the immortal tree was still there, wisps of dense energy swirling about. There were immortal seed fragments within as well, similarly possessing tremendous benefits. Ling Han, on the other hand, had no interest in staying any longer. He and the 3 women left the palace and arrived at the foot of the mountain, continuing their journey in the carriage. He told the 3 women about the message left by the female celestial king's divine sense, causing the empress and the others to be very surprised. Things in the world are so coincidental. Ling Han allowed the divine demon sword to fuse with the immortal tool in order to raise his own level. At the same time, he inspected his sea of consciousness. He now had 2 imprints that could form immortal seeds. Ling Han did not hesitate in the slightest, first nurturing the first imprint, turning it into a true immortal seed, because this was what he was going to use in medicine. During this process, he could study all of the secrets of this imprint and capture its essence. In the end, he would gather the essence of countless imprints and create a truly perfect immortal seed. The immortal seed was not a physical object, but rather a great Tao seed, a comprehension towards the Tao. It was the same for the Empress and the others. Now they were nurturing the celestial seed brand in their minds. If there was a better one, they would change it. If there was no better one, then when the 10,000 years came, they would use this celestial seed brand to complete their breakthrough. After all, it was a complete celestial seed, and the battle prowess that they would obtain after breaking through would definitely not be weak. The carriage swayed as they set out for the next city. In a mere dozen or so days, the divine demon sword had completely absorbed and refined the 4 damaged weapons. On the surface, there was not the slightest change, but when Ling Han held them in his hand, he could clearly feel that the divine demon sword had become slightly stronger. The main reason was that the leap from celestial king tier to heavenly venerable tier was too large. Perhaps hundreds or even thousands of pieces of divine metal would be needed to completely transform the divine demon sword. However, as long as one more piece of divine metal was fused into it, it would definitely improve. However, in terms of nurturing the immortal seed brand, the 4 of them did not make much of a breakthrough. Even if they used time acceleration on themselves, it would still take them at least 10 years in the real world for the immortal seed brand to mature and turn into a seed. As they walked, the carriage suddenly stopped. "Greetings, my lord," the coachman said in a trembling voice. Ling Han opened the door and saw the coachman almost prostrating himself on the ground. In front of him, 7 men were standing with their hands behind their backs. All of them were surrounded by strange lights. One of them was immortal King Songbei. He had disappeared for so long because he had gone to find help. Even though Ling Han was only in the ascending origin tier, his own battle prowess was already at the level of a celestial king. Added with the help of the divine demon sword, 2 or 3 first heaven celestial kings really wouldn't be able to defeat him. Thus, Celestial King Songbei could only travel a little more and ask for more helpers. Why were they all first firmament immortal kings and second firmament immortal kings? Wouldn't they be able to easily suppress Ling Han? It was very simple. If he managed to invite a second firmament immortal King Songbei would lose his right to speak. What he wished to obtain the most was Ling Han's soul. He wanted to extract the secrets of Ling Han's incredible strength. Ling Han's eyes swept over them, and an expression of disdain appeared on his face. High and mighty celestial kings still have to rely on numbers to win. Hee, you guys are really honorable. When these words were spoken, the 7 great celestial kings all looked furious. A mere ascending origin tier actually dared to point at their noses and scold them? How audacious! Really a guy who doesn't understand the rules, one of the celestial kings said coldly. Ling Han walked over to him, This celestial king was dressed in a purple robe, and he had the appearance of a middle-aged man. His figure was slender, and he had a majestic and domineering aura. He smiled faintly and said, "Old guy, do you know how to speak human language?" The purple-robed celestial king couldn't help but widen his eyes. "Brat, what did you say?" "Old guy, not only do you not know how to speak, but even your ears have problems." Ling Han scoffed. The other party had clearly come to attack him, so what need was there for him to be polite? "There's no need to lower yourself to his level. Just capture him," Celestial King Songbei said impatiently. He still remembered how he had fled in a sorry state, and his own home had been turned upside down by Ling Han. After hearing this, he really almost fainted in anger. Unprecedented shame and humiliation. "Brother Songbei, is this boy really so freakish?" a celestial king asked. He really couldn't believe that a mere ascending origin tier could rival a celestial king. Even if Celestial King Songbei repeatedly said that this was not a joke, he still couldn't accept it. Yes. Celestial King Songbei nodded solemnly. If not, why would he need to bring 6 helpers? Did they think he was shameless? Ling Han looked at Celestial King Songbei, and with a thought, the divine demon sword was already in his hand. His legs bent slightly, and he began to accumulate power. "This is that celestial tool?" The celestial kings all focused their eyes on the divine demon sword, their eyes filled with greed. Celestial King Songbei nodded. "This is indeed a celestial tool. I don't care how the 6 of you divide this celestial tool, as long as you hand this boy to me." "Okay." The other celestial kings all nodded. Shua. At this moment, Ling Han had also finished accumulating power. He suddenly swung his right hand, and the divine demon sword shot toward Celestial King Songbei like an arrow. This throw condensed all of Ling Han's power, and was also strengthened by the regulations of time, so it was indescribably fast. More importantly, now that the divine demon sword had absorbed the 4 broken weapons, it actually possessed new power. With a flash, the divine demon sword crossed the space, and arrived in front of Celestial King Songbei, as if it could ignore the distance. Celestial King Songbei was terrified. If it was another weapon, or even if another celestial king punched him like this, he was confident that he could save his life, but the injury would be more serious. However, the divine demon sword was too terrifying, and he had suffered losses before. He roared, wanting to dodge, but it was already too late. As he tried to lean back, he concentrated all his power on his forehead to resist this sword. Pooh! The divine demon sword slashed, and directly sank into Celestial King Songbei's forehead, piercing all the way, leaving only the hilt of the sword against his forehead. This celestial king staggered, his face full of disbelief. In such a short time, he was actually insta-killed by Ling Han's sword. Pung! He crashed to the ground. Suddenly, heaven and earth changed color, blood rain fell, and there was endless sorrow. The heaven and earth mourned the death of a celestial king. The other 6 celestial kings were stunned. Who would have thought that Ling Han would attack so decisively? He was clearly surrounded by 7 celestial kings, but he actually dared to attack first, and was so fierce and domineering, killing a celestial king with a single sword. When they thought about it again, they felt that although Ling Han's throw was powerful, it could at most kill a celestial king by surprise. The real killing weapon was the celestial weapon itself, which directly passed through space, and was so fast that even the celestial king couldn't react. Celestial King Songbei died really unjustly. In terms of strength, Celestial King Songbei was definitely not weaker than Ling Han, but he was killed with a single strike, which was a little hard for them to accept now. This celestial sword is too extraordinary. But it was only for an instant, and strong greed surged in the 6 celestial kings. In the hands of an ascending origin tier, this celestial sword was already so powerful. So if it was used by them, how powerful would its power be? Chapter 24-34. The 6 celestial kings all roared, and almost simultaneously pounced toward Celestial King Songbei's body. Of course, they weren't going for Celestial King Songbei's belongings, but wanted to snatch the divine demon sword that was still stuck in his forehead. This was truly 8 immortals crossing the sea, each displaying their own mystical abilities. The 6 celestial kings all used their full strength to ensure that they would be the first to reach. Ling Han shook his head. What are you fighting for? He crooked his finger, and Xiao, the divine demon sword, floated up on its own, exuding a frightening might as if a celestial king was displaying his might. From the perspective of tools, the divine demon sword was now only an 8-star pseudo-celestial tool. But even so, it was naturally a piece of cake for Ling Han to command it. But in terms of sharpness, the divine demon sword was too frightening. It had drunk the blood of celestial kings, refined divine metal, and overflowed with murderous aura that even celestial kings would be wary of. Sure enough, the divine demon sword floated in the air, and wherever its tip pointed, any celestial king would feel a chill and involuntarily retreat. With a thought from Ling Han, the divine demon sword immediately shot toward him. Pa! He reached out to catch it, and the divine demon sword was once again in his hands. He smiled faintly. Who else wants to die? The 6 celestial kings all looked troubled. They had just witnessed with their own eyes what kind of might the divine demon sword could unleash in Ling Han's hands. And they asked themselves, if this sword was aimed at them, who could be sure to block it? Not a single one. Thus, they all quickly pulled away. Only then would they feel safe. Mighty celestial kings and 6 against 1 at that, were actually so passive? It couldn't be helped. Who asked Ling Han to have such a powerful weapon? In fact, the 6 celestial kings didn't think that they couldn't suppress Ling Han, even if they joined forces. As long as the 6 of them attacked together, then Ling Han could only deal with 1 at most. 5 celestial kings could suppress an ascending origin tier, right? But the problem was, who was willing to be the one to be sacrificed? If Ling Han knew what they were thinking, he would definitely scoff at them. Although his battle prowess had barely reached the level of a celestial king, his defense was also at the same level. So what if 5 celestial kings attacked him at the same time? It would definitely not be a matter of 2 or 3 moves to cause a serious, or even fatal blow to him. The 6 great celestial kings were extremely gloomy. At first, they had thought that the 7 great celestial kings had joined forces for the sake of a measly ascending origin tier. But they had not even fought, and one of them had already been killed by Ling Han. Now they had even fallen into such a predicament. How could they accept this? In the face of Ling Han's disdain, they had nothing to say. Are you going to fight or not? If you're not going to fight, then don't block my way. Ling Han said lightly. Although this sentence was not very polite, it was much better than the previous sentence. The 6 celestial kings all shook their heads at one another. None of them were willing to sacrifice themselves for the sake of another. As such, the alliance naturally could not be formed. Xiao, 1 celestial king, left first, and then the second, the third, and in a mere instant, all 6 celestial kings had left. Ling Han did not let his guard down. The divine demon sword was too eye-catching, and those 6 celestial kings would definitely not give up easily. They would definitely hide in the shadows and wait for an opportunity to make a move. Celestial kings were the strongest beings of the celestial realm, and were on par with regulations themselves. Who dared to underestimate them? Let's continue on our way, Ling Han said calmly to the carriage driver. Yes. The carriage driver was practically stunned by Ling Han now. He had killed a celestial king with a single strike, and then forced the other 6 celestial kings to retreat. This battle record was really dazzling enough to blind one's eyes. He hurriedly went to activate the carriage, extremely respectful. Ling Han's eyes swept over Celestial King Songbei's corpse, and stretched out his hand to search his belongings. As for the corpse, he did not touch it again. After all, Celestial King Songbei was a human. He always felt that using the other's blood to improve himself was a bit strange, and difficult to accept. Unlike the foreign realm's ancestral kings, he did not feel any psychological pressure when using it. The carriage continued on, and a few months later, they arrived at the next city. However, there were no celestial fruits here that had just ripened, so they continued on their way, heading to the next city. Their luck seemed to have become worse. They consecutively went to several cities, but did not encounter any celestial fruits that had ripened, and the time they had spent on their journey had already been as long as 7 years. When they arrived at the next city, Ling Han simply stopped the carriage and did not continue on their way. They found an inn and began to focus on nurturing their celestial seeds and improving their battle prowess. In the blink of an eye, another 3 years had passed. Ling Han and the others had already fully developed their celestial seeds and had also fully understood the secrets within. They only needed to advance a tiny bit more, and they would be able to advance into the Celestial King tier. At this time they all stopped. They had great ambitions, and their first celestial seed was far from perfect, so it was not suitable to be their celestial seed. Ling Han began to open the cauldron to concoct pills. The ingredients had already been prepared, and they were only lacking celestial seeds. Before coming to the celestial path, Ling Han only planned to collect remnant seeds, slowly accumulate them into complete celestial seeds, and then concoct them into celestials. Who would have thought that their luck would be so good? And so quickly, each of them had a complete celestial seed, and there was even one more. They could already use it to concoct celestials. This was enough to make most future celestial kings die of jealousy, because if they consumed celestial seeds, their achievements would forever be limited to the first heaven, and that was too much of a waste. Ling Han, however, did not care. He took out the first celestial seed. This was no longer a physical one, but a complete spiritual imprint. No wonder consuming celestials could only be limited to the first heaven, because what was imprinted on it was another person's understanding of the great Tao. So how could it be improved a second time? Under the acceleration of time, in just half a day, Ling Han completed the concoction of celestial seeds. He succeeded, although the finished product barely reached the 2 stars, and he almost failed. However, this was his first time concocting a celestial seed, and it was a 5 stars one at that, which showed how shocking Ling Han's alchemy skills were. They ended their short seclusion and continued to advance. This stop was definitely worth it. Not because Ling Han had concocted a celestial seed, but because the Empress and the others had seen a great increase in their strength. They had officially leapt into the level of pseudo-celestial king tier. Ling Han had fought with them before. In a situation where he did not use any other techniques, the Empress and Hunyou's vitality could reach 4,800, and after consuming the Red Devil Earth, it could infinitely approach 5,000, but it was always that little bit off. And as for bewitching Maiden Ro, under normal circumstances, her vitality would be around 4,700, and after consuming the Red Devil Earth, it would soar to 4,900, which was also very powerful. Only when their battle prowess increased would they be able to obtain better celestial seeds. They all came to a sudden realization. If that was not the case, apart from people like Ling Han, who had heaven-defying fated luck, first becoming the ruler of a small heaven and earth, then encountering Wali, and obtaining the dimensional scroll, only then could he extract the energy of Suzi and push his body technique to the height of celestial king tier level. So what if the others were Ji Wuming? Their vitality would probably be 4,700 at most, and this was taking into account the Red Devil Earth. But now that they had a springboard, there was a possibility that they could obtain a perfect celestial seed. They once again set out, and arrived at the next city, and here, Ling Han discovered the cultivators of the Western Celestial Realm. It was not that they had already traveled halfway, and only then would they meet up with the cultivators of the Western Celestial Realm. Rather, after both sides had entered the celestial path, there was not too much of a gap between them in the first place, so they could meet here. Chapter 2436. Yuwudi was shocked. He already found it very incredible that there was an empress, and now there was a girl who was not inferior to him, which naturally shocked him to the extreme. There were too many geniuses. He thought highly of himself, and thought that he was unique. Fortunately, the empress was a girl, and she was shockingly beautiful, noble and unparalleled, which made him very satisfied. If he married her and made her his wife, they would become a family. Another one? Fortunately, it was still a girl. He roared, and raised his fists to meet the attack, not the slightest bit afraid. Pung pung pung, the three fought fiercely. Ling Han could confirm with a few glances that the normal battle prowess of the three of them was around 4,800. This was already very astonishing among pseudo-celestial kings, and it was only because they were all emperor stars that they could reach such a high level. Thus, it was difficult for the three to decide who was superior in a short time. If Wuxia suddenly used a celestial tool or something, he might win immediately. However, Wuxia did not use a powerful move, and only used ordinary moves to clash with the two girls. How could he match the Empress and Hunyo together? Wuxia gradually fell into a disadvantage. Everyone was speechless. Just now, Wuxia was extremely powerful, and even forced away a celestial king. But now he actually fell into a disadvantage. Although it was two girls working together, if their strength was not enough, not to mention two people working together, even 10 or 100 people, so what? Heavens, how many supreme freaks were there on the celestial path now? Although Wuxia fell into a disadvantage, he did not panic, but instead laughed loudly, wild and domineering. He finally took out the red devil soil and swallowed it. Instantly, a terrifying aura shook, and he was about to leap to a new height. The Empress and Hunyo did not dare to be careless, and hurriedly took out the red devil soil and swallowed it. In this world, only Ling Han could have celestial king-level battle prowess without using the red devil soil. Hong! The aura of the three was like a tide, as if they had suddenly broken through to the celestial king tier. The three fought again. No matter how strong they were before, or if there was some gap, after taking the red devil soil, their vitality could not exceed 5,000. In other words, the stronger one's battle prowess was, the smaller the increase in strength obtained from consuming the red devilish soil. It didn't count as long as one didn't exceed the upper limit. Unfortunately, all three of them had a combat power of 4,800. In theory, after consuming the red devil soil, their combat power should have exceeded 5,000. Therefore, their combat power was surprisingly uniform. All 4,999 points. 2 against 1. Hunyo and the Empress naturally had the upper hand, firmly suppressing Wuxia. Damn it! Wuxia roared, and a purple light suddenly surged over. Shwa! It immediately forced the Empress and Hunyo back. This was a violet gold staff that was covered in runes. As soon as it was taken out, it gave off a feeling of vicissitudes of history, but even more so, it gave off an unparalleled pressure. It was as if an unparalleled immortal king was about to walk out from the staff and crush the common people. Immortal weapons. This was definitely an immortal artifact, moreover one refined by a high-level immortal king. In Wuxia's hands, it might not be able to display its full power, but it was still enough to make half immortal king's expressions change, not daring to act rashly. Hunyo humphed. You're shameless, using a weapon when you can't win. Nyo looks down on you. Everyone was speechless. You guys had already broken the rules by fighting 2 against 1, and you still didn't allow others to use weapons. But Hunyo and the Empress were too beautiful, so beautiful that no one could bear to blame them. They only felt that this girl was cute and mischievous, and supported her one-sidedly. That's right, what's so great about a man relying on a weapon? And a celestial tool? I despise it. I can't afford it. Meanwhile, Wuxia was about to explode in fury. Why don't you guys try being attacked by 2 people whose strength was completely equal? If he could match them, he wouldn't want to draw out a weapon. Fuck, a bunch of people who didn't mind talking while standing. Ling Han also frowned slightly. The Empress and Hunyo were about to advance into the Celestial King tier, and it was time to equip them with celestial tools. Otherwise, if they encountered an opponent who had a celestial tool, they would be at a very big disadvantage. At least, they couldn't go all out, and would have a lot of scruples when they attacked. The next time they obtained celestial tools and celestial metal, he wouldn't let the divine demon sword swallow them, he thought. Ugly, move aside, Nyo will deal with him, Hunyo said to the Empress. In a one-on-one, the opponent should be too embarrassed to use a weapon. The Empress completely ignored him, and instead stretched out a hand towards Ling Han. Ling Han understood, and with a wave of his arm, the divine demon sword was immediately thrown towards the Empress. The Empress caught the sword, and then said to Hunyeo, "Little girl, don't stand here and get in the way." Wayaya. Hunyeo stomped her foot in anger. This woman was too evil. Everyone watched, and couldn't help but be speechless. Just then, the two girls were still teaming up. And now there were signs of internal strife. Were they sure they weren't playing around? Hunyeo angrily left the battle area. In a situation where their strength was so close, the two of them had a celestial tool. And she didn't. So it was really too dangerous. Her warlike nature was real. And her playful nature was also real. But she wasn't stupid at all. Ling Han, Neo also wants a celestial tool. The little girl shook Ling Han's arm and winked at Ling Han with all her might. Ling Han couldn't help but have goosebumps. It was fine for the little girl to pretend to be pure, as long as she acted as herself, but if she had to go the seductive route, then that was practically frightening. He patted Hunyo's small face. "All right, next time I get a celestial tool or divine metal, I'll definitely refine one for you." Only then did Hunyo nod in satisfaction and hugged Ling Han's arm, her expression filled with bliss. This made everyone in the surroundings die of envy. Though Hunyo was a bit unreliable, she was somewhat beautiful, and just now, everyone had witnessed her strength. She had not yet advanced into the Celestial King tier, yet she possessed strength that could rival a Celestial King. Being able to have such a beauty, how could others not be envious, jealous, and hateful? Ling Han only smiled faintly and patted Hunyo's head dotingly. Then he looked towards the sky. The Empress had already started a fierce battle with Yuwudi. Ding ding ding, the celestial tools clashed, exploding with a brilliant light that could almost blind one's eyes. And the deafening sound was even more deafening. Others couldn't do it, but Ling Han had no difficulty at all, because his physical arts were too terrifying. The Empress didn't gain the upper hand, but of course, she wasn't at a disadvantage either. The battle prowess of the two was really too close, and they both had celestial tools in hand. Who won and who lost was completely improvised on the spot. Very soon, 1,000 moves had passed, and the aura of the two began to drop. The effect of the Red Devil Earth was about to wear off. They each retreated 300 meters, and there was a short truce. "Fairy, we have no enmity, and we've already sparred. Why don't we shake hands and make up, drink some tea, and talk about martial art?" Yuwudi displayed what he thought was the most charming smile. The more Empress she was, the more he liked her. Yet the Empress's expression was cold. She pointed at Ling Han and said, "Kowtow and apologize to my husband, and I can consider letting you die a more painless death." Hiss, everyone gritted their teeth. This Empress was too domineering. But thinking again, if she wasn't so domineering, how could she be worthy of her temperament? Yuwudi's expression was filled with confusion. When had he offended her husband? But after thinking carefully, he immediately came to a realization and walked menacingly towards Ling Han. "So you're Ling Han?" Chapter 2437. Ling Han smiled faintly. "You know me. I didn't know you before. But I've heard that there was such an arrogant person who dared to look down on a celestial venerable just because he had a little opportunity." Yuwudi sneered. "I was already invincible several epochs ago, and in my eyes, you're just a piece of trash." Hunyo couldn't help but sneer. "Keep bragging. You haven't become a celestial king after several epochs. Who would believe you?" Yuwudi was proud. "I was born 7 epochs ago, and was already invincible in the ascending origin tier. However, my father predicted that there would be an amazing opportunity on the celestial path in this lifetime. And so he sealed me, allowing me to reappear in this lifetime." "Who's your father?" Ling Han's heart moved. Yuwudi seemed to have expected Ling Han to ask this, and puffed out his chest. "Imperial Void Celestial King." When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but make an "oh" sound, revealing an expression of extreme reverence. In the past, not many people knew of the existence of celestial venerables, but a few powerful celestial kings were well known, such as the Imperial Void Celestial King, whose strength definitely ranked in the top 3. Ling Han, meanwhile, revealed a sneer. "So it's this old bastard. You." Yuwudi was instantly furious, pointing a finger at Ling Han, killing intent swirling. inexplicably sinister. Isn't that so? Ling Han said calmly. Bullying the weak, shameless beyond compare. If I advance into the ninth heaven, I'll cut off his head and kick it like a ball. You're courting death. Yu Wuti roared, and immediately pounced at Ling Han, swinging his staff at his head. A purple light spread out, and the whole lake surface was rippling, but there were no raging waves. Being able to nurture a celestial seed, this place was indeed extraordinary. Catch the sword. The Empress threw with force, and the divine demon sword immediately flew towards Ling Han. Ling Han's right hand caught the sword, but his left hand had already reached out to press towards Yu Wuti. With your little strength, you dare to be arrogant in front of me? Space rules were activated, and Yu Wuti was immediately restrained. The effect of the red devilish earth was about to disappear, and his battle prowess had fallen to more than 4,800. Meanwhile, Ling Han's battle prowess was as high as 4,900 in terms of regulations, so he naturally had an overwhelming advantage. He easily restrained Yu Wuti. Yu Wuti roared, and the celestial implement in his hand shone with brilliant light. Wisps of purple chi flowed, and with a bang, the space shackles immediately collapsed. He charged out fiercely and domineeringly, the celestial implement opening the way, and with the purple light protecting him, he seemed untouchable. This was the power of a fairy artifact. Ling Han could trap Yu Wuti, but he could not bind the fairy artifact. As long as the fairy artifact exerted its power, Yu Wuti would not be affected. Therefore, even if this fairy weapon couldn't exert its power in Yu Wuti's hands, as long as it had such a function, it was already extremely terrifying and practical. Ling Han smiled faintly. He had already put on the Celestial King's ring. He didn't let the divine demon sword swallow it, because he felt that this thing might have other uses, and it would be a pity to directly refine it. Moreover, the amount was really too little, and wouldn't be of much help to the divine demon sword. He shot out a fist to meet the purple gold rod. Pung, a loud sound rang out, and a shockwave exploded out. The air was torn apart, turning into ripples that spread out in all directions. Yu Wuti retreated several hundred meters, blood flowing continuously from his hands. His hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the shock of the huge force. He looked shocked. In this blow, he was actually no match for Ling Han. It should be known that Ling Han still hadn't used his body technique. Otherwise, if his Celestial King level power erupted, it was possible that the rod would directly be sent smashing toward his forehead, and even his mind would instantly explode. Ling Han stopped. Although the ring was small, as long as it could withstand the terrifying destructive power of the celestial implement, it was fine. In any case, it couldn't be used, so what was there for him to fear? How is it? Ling Han asked. Yu Wuti gritted his teeth. He couldn't use the red devilish soil now. If he used it continuously, it would be an act of self-harm, or even suicide. He knew that Ling Han's strength was still above his, and the rumors were not false. This young man was incredibly terrifying. No wonder even his father told him to not be careless when he encountered Ling Han. However, once he used the red devilish soil, no matter how strong you were before, your strength could only be infinitely close to the Celestial King, and not surpass it. Thus, he didn't have to fear Ling Han at all. As long as he was given time, he could let him use the red devilish soil again. But Ling Han didn't want to waste time. He looked at the purple gold rod, smiled, and said, "This celestial tool is not bad." "Humph. The celestial tool that my father used in the past is not something you can covet," Yu Wuti said disdainfully. His origin power was circulating, and his injuries were quickly recovering. Celestial King Imperial Void was incomparably powerful, and he cultivated many laws. For example, this celestial tool was forged when he cultivated the metal element laws. But now, Celestial King Imperial Void no longer used celestial tools, because there was no celestial tool that could match his strength. As for celestial treasures, firstly, he didn't have the devouring metal, and secondly, even if he had it, he wouldn't be able to refine it. Ling Han smiled, his face full of confidence. "It won't be long before I make that old geezer Imperial Void kneel down and sing I've conquered." "You're delusional," Yu Wuti said loudly. His face was full of anger, but he restrained himself from attacking. Of course, he still couldn't use the red devilish soil. Fighting with Ling Han now would be too much of a loss. Ling Han didn't care. He leaped forward, punching out again and again. Yu Wuti hurriedly retreated. He knew that there was a gap between his strength and Ling Han's. If he fought recklessly, he definitely wouldn't have a good ending. He had to stall for time. As long as he could stall for time until he could use the red devilish soil again, he would launch a strong counterattack, and even kill Ling Han. But Ling Han had already made up his mind to kill. All kinds of laws were activated, and their power was terrifying. Fortunately, Yu Wuti had the protection of the violet gold immortal staff. Otherwise, he would be smashed into pieces in less than 100 moves. There was a difference of about 100 points, which was equivalent to a Tharch crushing a Tharch. Ling Han laughed and said mockingly, "You should change your name." Yu Wuti was retreating pathetically, and it was a fair battle of equal cultivation levels. Yu Wuti's face was slightly red. Back then, he was indeed invincible in his era. No one could fight him at the same level. If it wasn't for the great opportunity, he would have become a 9th-level celestial king long ago. How could it be Ling Han's turn to be so impudent in front of him? He just waved his staff to dispel the laws. No matter how Ling Han mocked him, he didn't say a word. However, Ling Han's fists were getting heavier and heavier. It was as if every punch could shatter the heaven and earth. Yu Wuti couldn't take it anymore. Even if he kept dodging, just being swept by the wind from the fists would cause his skin to split open. Moreover, Ling Han's speed was ridiculously fast. If it wasn't for the fact that he could still activate the might of the celestial tool to a limited extent, he was afraid that he would already be a corpse. He didn't know that Ling Han's physical arts were terrifying, and he definitely didn't believe that there was such a big gap between him and Ling Han. Ling Han must have taken the red devilish soil and wanted to kill him while he was still free. Shameless, really too shameless. Yu Wuti gritted his teeth and held on. He was the descendant of a top-notch celestial king, and he himself was a freak that could sweep away the prodigies of his era. Of course, he also had astonishing aspects. He used celestial techniques one after another, but it was just to buy himself a little more time. However, under the absolute suppression of strength, this was basically a dream. "You're too shameless," he roared. Previously, Ling Han must have deliberately let the Empress and Hunyo attack, so that he would waste the opportunity to use the red devilish soil. Chapter 2438. Ling Han didn't bother to explain. He was about to die, so what was the point of talking nonsense with him? He exerted his full strength. His body arts and regulations, even if his vitality couldn't exceed 5,000 points, his battle prowess rose to a new height. No matter how Yu Wuti tossed and turned, he couldn't do anything. "Ah!" Yu Wuti roared in anger. He was filled with hatred. He was so close to consuming the red devil's soil, but it was that close that he couldn't support himself anymore, and his soul was about to die here. He was naturally unwilling. He had been sealed for several epochs, and was invincible among his peers in the past. However, Ling Han's punches became heavier and heavier, and he was finally forced to the end of the line. Peng punch blasted out, and Yu Wuti couldn't block it anymore. His forehead was instantly punched, and with the terrifying power of Ling Han's punch, this punch would definitely shatter his head into pieces. "Huh?" Ling Han looked surprised. Although this punch had hit Yu Wuti, it didn't really hit him, because that celestial tool had shown its might. As the purple gold brilliance surged, a power that far surpassed that of a first heaven celestial king exploded and rushed toward him. Even if Ling Han saw that the situation was bad and had already activated the indestructible heavens scroll in advance, he still felt that the bones in his right arm were shattered under the collision. And under the impact, his internal organs were also severely injured, and it was indescribably uncomfortable. The supreme might circulated, and 9-colored light rose from the rod, transforming into a middle-aged man. Imperial Void Celestial King Yu Wuti was overjoyed. Even he didn't know that this celestial tool actually hit a wisp of his father's will. Presumably, this was because the Imperial Void Celestial King didn't want his son to develop the habit of relying on him. And so he didn't say it. but when his son was in danger, it would still be activated. Ling Han channeled a drop of indestructible true fluid, and his injuries began to rapidly recover. However, he had been killed by the celestial tool, after all, so he didn't immediately recover. He couldn't help but secretly tell himself that he couldn't underestimate others, or he might really lose his life because of carelessness. Ha ha ha. Yu Wuti laughed. Who would have thought that the situation would be reversed so quickly? Now Ling Han was seriously injured, and he would soon be able to use the Red Devil soil. Next, it would be his turn to beat Ling Han. Boy, you can't be too arrogant, or you'll be struck by lightning, he sneered. Although his father had only left a wisp of consciousness, he could activate the celestial tool. And this purple celestial staff was forged by Imperial Celestial King in his early days. Of celestial was already a ninth celestial. With this he was tooked. 2. He had of this of, and CNT, of celestial, and of celestial of the and Ling of. He had to kill him. Putting aside the arrogance in front of him, he had to kill him just for the sake of the Imperial Void Immortal King. I'll return your words to you. You'll be struck by lightning if you act tough, Ling Han said. Go to hell. Invincible, Yu waved his cudgel horizontally. Because his life was no longer in danger, the immortal cudgel no longer displayed its might. After all, this was the path of immortals. Immortal kings could not even enter. Only a peerless level 9 immortal king, like the Imperial Void Immortal King, could leave behind a strand of divine sense to activate an immortal treasure. Therefore, this strand of consciousness must be very weak to be able to deceive the heavens and the earth. Of course, it would only show its power when it needed to save a life. Ling Han humphed and swung his fist to meet the attack. Pung! The celestial staff immediately bounced up, and Yu Wuti almost lost his grip. Yu Wuti turned pale with fright. He thought that Ling Han would be severely injured to the point where he was on the verge of death. That was a treasure refined by a 9th-tier immortal king, which could easily kill a 1st-tier immortal king. However, Ling Han's powerful counterattack allowed him to realize that his opponent's injuries were far from being as severe as he had imagined. On the contrary, his opponent's battle prowess was practically at its strongest. How was this possible? That was a treasure refined by his father. He could not accept this. What kind of monster was this Ling Han? In his time, there was no such monster, and he was the only one on the Imperial Star. Otherwise, he could not have been invincible among those of the same cultivation level. Yu Wuti stood with his staff. What he needed to do now was very simple, which was to stall for time. As long as he could stall for time until he could take the Red Devil soil again, he would definitely win, because Ling Han had taken the Red Devil soil before him. His confidence was, of course, based on the fact that no one could possess the battle prowess of a celestial king without taking the Red Devil soil. But who told Ling Han to have such a heaven-defying fateful encounter and become such a unique existence? Ling Han attacked fiercely again. His injuries had been completely healed by the operation of the indestructible true fluid, and he was still very strong. As long as the celestial tool did not show its power, a mere Yu Wuti was nothing to him. This time, he had learned his lesson and experience, so he naturally would not put himself in danger again. Instead, he would put some distance between himself and Yu Wuti before attacking again. This reduced his lethality, but he was much stronger than Yu Wuti and could easily kill him. Therefore, the consciousness of the Celestial King in the purple gold staff was also constantly activated. It could be seen that after dozens of times, the figure of the Imperial Void Celestial King was becoming fainter and fainter. This meant that the method that the Imperial Void Celestial King left for his son could save him dozens of times, which showed how much he treasured his son. But who would have thought that there would be a monster like Ling Han on the celestial path, who was about to push Yu Wuti into a desperate situation so soon? Damn it! Damn it! Yu Wuti roared. But in order to train him, the consciousness left by the Imperial Void Celestial King could only be activated passively to protect him, but could not actively attack, so it could not do anything to Ling Han. Was he really going to die here? As this thought flashed through his mind, Woody could not help but feel a chill all over his body. From birth until now, he had never thought that there would be a day that he would die. He had a father that was almost invincible, and he himself was also an emperor star. So he was destined to become a ninth heaven celestial king. There was no need to consider the immortal's tribulation. But now, the knife of death was already on his neck. Just at this moment, he suddenly showed a look of joy, and it was an expression of ecstasy. He could take the red devilish earth again. Your good days are over. Woody laughed, and hurriedly took out the red devilish earth and consumed it. Instantly, his aura soared, and his power surged, reaching the level of a celestial king. Die! He charged out, waving the purple gold staff in an extremely domineering manner. His current strength was already infinitely close to a celestial king, so he could naturally exert the power of a celestial tool to a certain extent, further increasing his battle prowess. Ling Han no longer used his fists to meet the attack, but used the divine demon sword. At this time, the power of the purple gold staff was too strong, and the celestial king ring alone could not match it, so he had to rely on the power of the divine demon sword. Boom boom boom. The two pseudo-celestial kings rode on their celestial tools and attacked each other, further increasing the scale of the battle. The rest of the people could only watch with wide eyes. The more Woody fought, the more ferocious he became. He had been suppressed by Ling Han for really too long, and he could not wait to suppress Ling Han and fiercely vent his anger. Ling Han was unafraid. His physical strength was incredibly long, and he did not need to worry about exhausting it at all. After fighting for 30 minutes, Woody's expression changed involuntarily. Why was Ling Han's battle prowess still so strong, and did not show the slightest sign of weakening? Fuck, he had already taken the red devilish earth for a long time. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.